Hello, everyone. I'm going to turn my mic down just a bit, but hey, my name's Jack. I'm a panda, and today I'm actually kind of getting used to that introduction, as silly as it is. Welcome to my casino, though today it's closed because we're reading. So yeah, as usual, we're reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We're on book 2, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. And I actually wanted to try doing an actual intro for it today, but I imagine it's probably going to get like copyright struck or something, or at least muted in the VOD. But we can always see, because I want to pull it off anyway somehow. Anyway, so yeah, welcome, and I hope you like listening if you stick around. Right, so let's get to it then. So we just have to turn down my background music, and I might turn up myself as well, but there we go. Okay, I hope this is okay. Okay, so here we go. Ready. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, written by Douglas Adams, read by Jack Panda. Okay. Sorry, I wanted to do that. I've been trying to get it worked for a while, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, so let's just continue from there then. Or it made me happy. Okay, right, here we go. So last time we left off, let's see, where were we? Marvin had managed to smash a machine, a large war machine, that had been chasing Zaphod and the new man that he just met on his journey to see Mr. Zarniwoop, the head of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Ursa Minor Beta Publishing Corporation. They'd been chased up and into the public headquarters of the company, and well, he was being chased because he, as the president of the galaxy, he had basically screwed over a lot of people he shouldn't have done, and Marvin had he sent Marvin to go and fight this great big war machine, who basically Marvin tricked into throwing itself off the ledge by destroying the floor beneath itself in a fit of rage. And now that leaves Zaphod and Rooster trying to find Zarniwoop. So we're going to start from there. Just going to turn that down again. Okay. Okay. And here we go. So, Chapter 8. So, do we just sit here or what? Said Zaphod angrily. What do these guys out there want? You, Beeblebrox, said Rooster. They're going to take you to the Frog Star, the most totally evil world in the galaxy. Oh yeah? Said Zaphod. They'll have to come and get me first. They have come and got you, said Rooster. Look out the window. Zaphod looked and gaped. The ground's going away, he gasped. Where are they taking the ground? They're taking the building, said Rooster. We're airborne. Clouds streaked past the office window. Out in the open air, again, Zaphod could see the ring of dark green Frogstar fighters round the uprooted tower of the building. A network of force beams radiated in from them and held the tower in a firm grip. Zaphod shook his head in perplexity. What have I done to deserve this? He said. I walk into a building, they take it away. It's not what you've done they're worried about, said Rooster. It's what you're going to do. Well, don't I get a say in that? You did years ago. You better hold on. We're in for a fast and bumpy journey. If I ever meet myself, said Zaphod, I'll hit myself so hard I won't know it's hit me. Marvin trudged in through the door, looked at Zaphod accusingly, slumped in a corner, and switched himself off. On the bridge of the Heart of Gold, all was silent. Arthur stared at the rack in front of him and thought. He caught Trillian's eyes as she looked at him inquiringly. He looked back at the rack. Finally, he saw it. He picked up 5 small plastic squares and laid them on the board that lay just in front of the rack. The 5 squares had the 5 letters E, X, Q, U, and I. He laid them next to the letters S-I-T-E. Exquisite, he said, on a triple word score. Score's rather a lot, I'm afraid. The ship bumped and scattered some of the letters for the nth time. Trillian sighed and started to sort them out again. Up and down the silent corridors echoed Ford Prefect's feet as he stalked the ship, thumping dead instruments. Why did the ship keep shaking, he thought. Why did it rock and sway? Why could he not find out where they were? Where, basically, were they? The left-hand tower of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy offices streaked through interstellar space at a speed never equalled either before or since by any other office block in the universe. In a room halfway up it, Zaphod Beeblebrox strode angrily. Rooster sat on the edge of the desk doing some routine towel maintenance. "Hey, where did you say this building was flying to?" demanded Zaphod. "The Frog Star," said Rooster. "The most totally evil place in the universe." "Do they have food there?" said Zaphod. "Food? You're going to the Frog Star and you're worried about whether or not they've got food." "Without food, I may not make it to the Frog Star." Out of the window, they could see nothing but the flickering light of the force beams and a vague green streak, which were presumably the distorted shapes of the Frog Star fighters. At this speed, space itself was invisible, and indeed unreal. "Here, suck this," said Rooster, offering Zaphod his towel. Zaphod stared at him as if he expected a cuckoo to leap out of his forehead on a small spring. "It's soaked in nutrients," explained Rooster. "What are you, a messy eater or something?" said Zaphod. "The yellow stripes are high in protein, the green ones have vitamin B and C complexes, the little pink ones contain wheat germ extracts." Zaphod took it and looked at it in amazement. "What are the brown stains?" he said. "Barbecue sauce," said Rooster, "for when I get sick of wheat germ." Zaphod sniffed it doubtfully. Even more doubtfully, he sucked a corner. He spat it out again. "Ugh," he stated. "Yes," said Rooster. "When I've had to suck that end, I usually need to suck the other end a bit too." "Why?" asked Zaphod suspiciously. "What's in that?" "Antidepressants," said Rooster. "I've gone right off this towel, you know," said Zaphod, handing it back. Rooster took it back from him, swung himself off the desk, walked round it, sat in the chair and put his feet up. "Beeblebrox," he said, sticking his hands up behind his head. "Have you any idea what's going to happen to you on the Frog Star?" "They're going to feed me?" asked Zaphod haphazardly and hopefully. "They're going to feed you," said Rooster, "into the total perspective vortex." Zaphod had never heard of this. He believed that he had heard of all the fun things in the galaxy, so he assumed the total perspective vortex was not fun. He asked what it was. "Only," said Rooster, "the most savage psychic torture a sentient being can undergo." Zaphod nodded a resigned nod. "So," he said, "no food, huh?" "Listen," said Rooster urgently. "You can kill a man, destroy his body, break his spirit, but only the total perspective vortex can annihilate a man's soul. The treatment lasts seconds, but the effect lasts the rest of your life." "You ever had a pan-galactic gargle blaster?" asked Zaphod sharply. "This is worse." "Frah," admitted Zaphod, much impressed. "Any idea why these guys might want to do it to me?" he added a moment later. "They believe it will be the best way of destroying you forever. They know what you're after." "Could they drop me a note and let me know as well?" "You know," said Rooster, "you know, Beeblebrox, you want to meet the man who rules the universe." "Can he cook?" said Zaphod. On reflection, he added, "I doubt if he can. If he could cook a good meal, he wouldn't worry about the rest of the universe. I want to meet a good cook." Rooster sighed heavily. "What are you doing here anyway?" "Oh, what are you doing here anyway?" demanded Zaphod. "What's all this got to do with you?" "I'm just one of those who planned this thing, along with Zani Whoop, along with Yuden Vranks, along with your great-grandfather, along with you, Beeblebrox." "Me?" "Yes, you. I was told you had changed. I didn't realize how much." "But I'm here to do one job. I will do it before I leave you." "What job, man? What are you talking about?" I will do it before I leave you. Rooster lapsed into an impenetrable silence. Zaphod was terribly glad. Chapter 9. The air around the second planet of the Frogstar system was stale and unwholesome. The dank winds that swept continually up and over its surface swept over salt flats, dried up marshlands, tangled and rotting vegetation, and the crumbling remains of ruined cities. No life moved across its surface. The ground, like that of many planets in this part of the galaxy, had long been deserted. The howl of the wind was desolate enough as it gusted through the old decaying houses of the cities. It was more desolate as it whipped about the bottoms of the tall black towers that swayed uneasily here and there, about the surface of this world. At the top of those towers lived the colonies of large, scraggy, evil-smelling birds, the sole survivors of the civilization that once lived here. The howl of the wind was at its most desolate, however, when it passed over the pimple of a place set in the middle of a wide grey plain on the outskirts of the largest of the abandoned cities. This pimple of a place was the thing that had earned this world the reputation of being the most totally evil place in the galaxy. Without it, it was simply a steel dome about 30 feet across. From within it was something more monstrous than the mind can comprehend. Hello there, Manny Mater. Thank you for following. Hope you enjoy your time here at the casino, even if it is currently closed for reading day. But hi, how are you doing? About 100 yards or so away, and separated from it by a pockmarked and blasted stretch of the most barren land imaginable, was what would probably have to be described as a landing pad of sorts. I'm good, thank you. Just enjoying the book. That is to say, scattered over a largish area were the ungainly hulks of 2 or 3 dozen crash-landed buildings. Flitting over and around these buildings was a mind that was waiting for something. The mind directed its attention into the air, and before very long a distant speck appeared, surrounded by a ring of smaller specks. Hey, Sniper Bro! How you doing? The largest speck was the left-hand tower of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy office building, descending through the stratosphere of Frogstar World B. As it descended, Rooster suddenly broke the long, uncomfortable silence that had grown up between the two men. He stood up and gathered his towel into a bag. He said, "Beeblebrox, I will now do the job I was sent here to do." Zaphod looked at him from where he was sitting in a corner, sharing unspoken thoughts with Marvin. Yeah, I've got to be real big again. I'm reading. It's just a reading stream. I can't be tiny if I'm supposed to be in the middle of the screen. I actually like bamboo. I'm an omnivore. I was only small because otherwise I would have been too big for the entirety of the gaming stream. But yeah, I can change size. That's my thing, apparently. Yeah, he said. The building will shortly be landing. When you leave the building, do not go out the door, said Rooster. Go out the window. Good luck, he added, and walked out the door, disappearing from Zaphod's life as mysteriously as he had entered it. Zaphod leapt up and tried the door, but Rooster had already locked it. He shrugged and returned to the corner. 2 minutes later, the building crash-landed amongst the other wreckage. Its escort of Frogstar fighters deactivated their force beams and soared off into the air again, bound for Frogstar World A, an altogether more congenial spot. They never landed on Frogstar World B. No one did. No one ever walked on its surface, other than the intended victims of the total perspective vortex. Zaphod was badly shaken by the crash. He lay for a while in the silent, dusty rubble to which most of the room had been reduced. He felt that he was at the lowest ebb he had ever reached in his life. He felt bewildered, he felt lonely, he felt unloved. Oh. Eventually, he felt he ought to get whatever it was over with. He looked around the cracked and broken room. The wall had split round the doorframe, and the door hung open. The window, by some miracle, was closed and unbroken. For a while he hesitated. Then he thought if this strange and recent companion had been through all that he had been through just to tell him what he told him, then there must be a good reason for it. With Marvin's help, he got the windows open. Outside it, a cloud of dust aroused by the crash and the hulks of the other buildings with which this one was surrounded effectively prevented Zaphod from seeing anything of the world outside. Yeah, he only wears a jacket. He doesn't wear pants. He's like Yogi Bear or something. It's just more comfortable that way. Not that this concerned him unduly. His main concern was what he saw when he looked down. Zarniwoop's office was on the 15th floor. The building had landed at a tilt of about 45 degrees, but still the descent looked heart-stopping. Eventually, stung by the continuous series of contemptuous looks that Marvin appeared to be giving him, he took a deep breath and clambered out onto the steeply inclined side of the building. Marvin followed him, and together they began to crawl slowly and painfully down the 15 floors that separated them from the ground. "Hello, Ren, and thanks for lurking. Thanks for being here. It's always appreciated." Yeah, I agree. Ban pants. Pants are bad for humanity in general. I mean, unless you're human, in which case you kind of need them. Oh, and thank you for the follow. I hope you enjoy your time here. I hope you enjoy listening. As he crawled, the dank air and dust choked his lungs. His eyes smarted, and the terrifying distance down made his head spin. His heads spin. The occasional remark from Marvin of the order of, "This is the sort of thing you life forms enjoy, is it? I ask merely for information." There we go. Some background noise. BGM, rather. Yeah, the occasional remark from Marvin of the order of, "This is the sort of thing you life forms enjoy, is it? I ask merely for information," did little to improve his state of mind. About halfway down the side of the shattered building, they stopped to rest. It seemed to Zaphod as he lay there panting with fear and exhaustion that Marvin seemed a mite more cheerful than usual. Eventually he realised this wasn't so. The robot just seemed cheerful in comparison with his own mood. A large, scraggy black bird came flapping through the slowly settling clouds of dust and, stretching down its scrawny legs, landed on an inclined window ledge a couple of yards from Zaphod. It folded its ungainly wings and teetered awkwardly on its perch. Its wingspan must have been something like 6 feet, and its head and neck seemed curiously large for a bird. Its face was flat, the beak underdeveloped, and halfway along the underside of the wings, the vestiges of something hand-like could be seen. In fact, it looked almost human. It turned its heavy eyes on Zaphod and clicked its beak in a dulcetory fashion. "Go away," said Zaphod. "Okay," said the bird morosely and flapped off into the dust again. Zaphod watched its department in bewilderment. "Did that bird just talk to me?" he asked Marvin nervously. He was quite prepared to believe the alternate explanation, that he was in fact hallucinating. "Yes," confirmed Marvin. "Poor souls." Oh wait. "Poor souls," said a deep, ethereal voice in Zaphod's ear. Twisting round violently to find the source of the voice nearly caused Zaphod to fall off the building. He grabbed savagely at a protruding window fitting and cut his hand on it. He hung on, breathing heavily. The voice had no visible source whatsoever. There was no one there. Nevertheless, it spoke again. "A tragic history behind them, you know. A terrible blight." Zaphod looked wildly about. The voice was deep and quiet. In other circumstances, it could even be described as soothing. There is, however, nothing soothing about being addressed by a disembodied voice out of nowhere, particularly if you are, like Zaphod Beeblebrox, not your best at hanging from a ledge 8 stories up a crashed building. "Hey, he stammered. "Shall I tell you their story?" inquired the voice quietly. "Hey, who are you?" panted Zaphod. "Where are you?" "Later then, perhaps," murmured the voice. "I am Gragravar. I am the custodian of the total perspective vortex. Why can't I see? You will find your progress down the building greatly facilitated," the voice lifted, "if you move about 2 yards to your left. Why don't you try it?" Zaphod looked and saw a series of short, horizontal grooves leading all the way down the side of the building. Gratefully, he shifted himself across to them. "Why don't I see you again at the bottom?" said the voice in his ear, and it spoke, and as it spoke, it faded. "Hey!" called out Zaphod. "Where are you?" "It'll only take a couple of minutes," said the voice very faintly. "Marvin," said Zaphod earnestly to the robot squatting dejectedly beside him. Did a voice just... "Yes," replied Marvin tersely. Zaphod nodded. He took out his peril-sensitive sunglasses again. They were completely black by now, and by now, quite badly scratched by the unexpected metal object in his pocket. He put them on. He would find his way down the building more comfortably if he didn't actually have to look at what he was doing. Minutes later, he clambered over the ripped and mangled foundations of the building, and, once more removing his sunglasses, he dropped to the ground. Marvin joined him a moment or so later, and lay face down in the dust and rubble, from which position he seemed too disinclined to move. "Ah, there you are," said the voice suddenly in Zaphod's ear. "Excuse me leaving you like that. It's just that I have a terrible head for heights. At least," it added wistfully, "I did have a terrible head for heights." Zaphod looked around slowly and carefully, just to see if he had missed something which might be the source of the voice. All he saw, however, was the dust, the rubble, and the towering hulks of encircling buildings. "Hey, why can't I see you?" he said. "Why aren't you here?" "I am here," said the voice slowly. "My body wanted to come, but it's a bit busy at the moment. Things to do, people to see." After what seemed like a sort of ethereal sigh, it added, "You know how it is with bodies." Zaphod wasn't sure about this. "I thought I did," he said. "I only hope it's gone for a rest cure," continued the voice. "The way it's been living recently, it must be on its last elbows." "Elbows?" said Zaphod. "Don't you mean last legs?" The voice said nothing for a while. Zaphod looked around uneasily. He didn't know if it was gone, or if it was still there, or what it was doing. Then the voice spoke again. "So, you are to be put into the vortex, yes?" Well," said Zaphod with a very poor attempt at a nonchalance. "This cat's in no hurry, you know. I could just slouch about and have a look at the local scenery, you know." "Have you seen the local scenery?" asked the voice of Gagravar. No." Zaphod clambered over the rubble and rounded the corner of one of the wrecked buildings that was obscuring his view. He looked out at the landscape of Frogstar World B. "Ah, okay," he said. "I'll just sort of slouch them for a bit." "No," said Gagravar. "The vortex is ready for you now. You must come. Follow me." Yeah," said Zaphod. "And how am I meant to do that?" "I'll hum for you," said Gagravar. "Follow the humming." A soft keening sound drifted through the air. A pale, sad sound that seemed to be without any kind of focus. It was only by listening very carefully that Zaphod was able to detect the direction from which it was coming. Slowly, dazedly, he stumbled off in its wake. What else was there to do? Chapter 10. The universe has been observed before, is an unsettlingly big place. A fact which, for the sake of a quiet life, most people tend to ignore. Many would happily move to somewhere rather smaller of their own devising, and this is what most beings in fact do. For instance, in one corner of the eastern galactic arm lies the large forest planet Oglaroon, the entire quote-unquote intelligent population of which lives permanently in one fairly small and crowded nut tree, in which tree they are born, live, fall in love, carve tiny speculative articles in the bark on the meaning of life, the futility of death, and the importance of birth control, fight a few extremely minor wars, and eventually die strapped to the underside of some of the less accessible outer branches. Oh, thank you for commenting. I haven't checked the VODs in a while, though. Sorry, I need to actually look. Yeah, but thank you for commenting. I'll go and have a look once I'm done. In fact, the only Oglaroons who ever leave their tree are those who are hurled out of it for the heinous crime of wondering whether any of the other trees might be capable of supporting life at all, or indeed whether the other trees are anything other than illusions brought on by eating too many nuts. I'll check it out. Exotic though this behaviour may seem, there is no life form in the galaxy which is not in some way guilty of the same thing, which is why the total perspective vortex is as horrific as it is. For when you are put into the vortex, you are given just one momentary glimpse of the entire unimaginable infinity of creation, and somewhere in it, a tiny little marker, a microscopic dot on a microscopic dot, which says, "You are here." The grey plain stretched before Zaphod, a ruined, shattered plain. The wind whipped wildly over it. Visible in the middle of the steel pimple of the dome was the dome. This, gathered Zaphod, was where he was going. This was the total perspective vortex. As he stood and gazed bleakly at it, a sudden inhuman wail of terror emanated from it, as of a man having his soul burnt away from his body. It screamed above the wind and died away. Zaphod started with fear, and his blood seemed to turn to liquid helium. "Hey, what was that?" he muttered voicelessly. "A recording," said Gagravar. "Hello, Cart of Aleko. Can I call you Aleko? Or Cart? Cartov? How you doing? Thanks for coming. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing okay." "A recording," said Gagravar. "Okay, I'll call you Carto if that's okay with you. Hiya." Yeah, I'm good. Just enjoying the book. I hope other people are enjoying it too." "A recording," said Gagravar, "of the last man who was put in the vortex. It is always played to the next victim, a sort of prelude." "Hey, it sounds really bad," stammered Zaphod. "Couldn't we maybe slope off to a party or something for a while, think it over?" "For all I know," said Gagravar's ethereal voice, "I'm probably at one. My body is, that is. It goes to a lot of parties without me. Says I only get in the way. Hey-ho." "I'm glad. It's one of my favourites too. I just wanted something jazzy, because I usually like electro swing for my soundtracks and my BGM. But I thought something jazzy and relaxed would be nicer. But yeah, I hope you do enjoy it here, Carto. So thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around. "What is all this with your body?" said Zaphod, anxious to delay whatever it was that was going to happen to him. "Well, it's busy, you know," said Gagravar hesitantly. "You mean it's got a mind of its own?" said Zaphod. "I hope you enjoy your pizza. What kind of pizza is it?" "Oh, right." "Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I was always wondering if maybe I should keep the music turned up just a bit to keep it, less tedious, but I guess I've got it down very low. But oh, self-made pizza is good. I really like self-made pizza. But yeah, thank you for the compliment, Ren. I appreciate it. I'm glad it's relaxing. Right. Where was I? "You mean it's got a mind of its own?" said Zaphod. There was a long and chilly pause before Gagravar spoke again. "I have to say," he replied eventually, "that I find that remark in rather poor taste." Zaphod muttered a bewildered and embarrassed apology. "No matter," said Gagravar. "You weren't to know." The voice fluttered unhappily. "The truth is," it continued in tones which suggested he was trying very hard to keep it under control, "the truth is that we are currently undergoing a period of legal trial separation. I suspect it will end in divorce." The voice was still again, leaving Zaphod with no idea of what to say. He mumbled uncertainly. "I think we are probably not very well suited," said Gagravar again at length. "We never really seem to be happy doing the same things. We always had the greatest arguments over sex and fishing. Eventually we tried to combine the two, but that only led to disaster, as you can probably imagine. And now my body refuses to let me in. It won't even see me. He paused again, tragically. The wind whipped across the plain. It says I only inhibit it, rather. I pointed out the fact that I was meant to inhibit it. I think this version of the book's been mistyped to him. I would do if I was there. I appreciate the offer, though. It says I only inhibit it. I pointed out the fact that I was meant to inhibit it, and it said that was exactly the sort of smart-aleck remark that got right up a body's left nostril, and so we left it. It will probably get custody of my forename. Oh, said Zaphod faintly. And what's that? Pizpot, said the voice. My name is Pizpot Gagravar. Says it all, really, doesn't it? Said Zaphod sympathetically. And that is why I, as a disembodied voice, have this job, custodian of the total perspective vortex. No one will ever walk on the ground of this planet, except the victims of the vortex. They don't really count, I'm afraid. I'll tell you the story. Would you like to hear it? Many years ago, this was a thriving, happy planet. People, cities, shops, a normal world. So be careful, Sniper, don't go burning yourself. Don't want to burn the roof of your mouth or something, that sucks. A normal world, except that on the high streets of these cities, there were slightly more shoe shops than one might have thought necessary. And slowly, insidiously, the number of these shoe shops were increasing. It's a well-known economic phenomenon, but tragic to see in operation, for the more shoe shops there were, the more shoes they had to make, and the worse and more unwearable they became. And the worse they were to wear, the more people had to buy to keep themselves shod. And the more the shops proliferated, until the whole economy of the place passed what I believe is termed the shoe event horizon. And it became no longer economically possible to build anything other than shoe shops. Result, collapse, ruin, and famine. Most of the population died out. Those few who had the right kind of genetic instability mutated into birds. You've seen one of them, who cursed their feet, cursed the ground, and vowed that none should walk on it again. Unhappy lot. Come, I must take you to the vortex. Zaphod shook his head in bemusement and stumbled forward across the plain. And you, he said, you come from this hellhole pit, do you? No, said Gagravar, taken aback. I come from the Frogstar World Sea. Beautiful place, wonderful fishing. I flit back there in the evenings, though all I can do now is watch. The total perspective vortex is the only thing on this planet with any function. It was built here because no one else wanted it on their doorstep. At that moment, another dismal scream rent the air and Zaphod shuddered. What can that do to a guy? He breathed. The universe, said Gagravar simply. The whole infinite universe. The infinite suns, the infinite distances between them, and yourself an invisible dot on an invisible dot. Infinitely small. Hey, I'm Zaphod Beeblebrox, man. You know? Muttered Zaphod, trying to flap the last remnants of his ego. Gagravar made no reply, but merely resumed his mournful humming, till they reached the tarnished steel dome in the middle of the plain. As they reached it, a door hummed open in the side, revealing a small darkened chamber within. Enter, said Gagravar. Zaphod started with fear. Hey, what now? Oh, hey, what, now? He said. Now. Zaphod peered nervously inside. The chamber was very small. It was steel-lined, and there was hardly space in it for more than one man. It doesn't look like any kind of vortex to me, said Zaphod. It isn't, said Gagravar. It's just the elevator. Enter. With infinite trepidation, Zaphod stepped into it. He was aware of Gagravar being in the elevator with him, though the disembodied man was not for the moment speaking. The elevator began its descent. I must get myself in the right state of mind for this, he said, muttered Zaphod. There is no right frame of mind, said Gagravar sternly. You really know how to make a guy feel inadequate. I don't. The vortex does. At the bottom of the shaft, the rear of the elevator opened up and Zaphod stumbled out into a smallish, functional, steel-lined chamber. At the far right of it stood a single upright steel box, just large enough for a man to stand in. It was that simple. It connected a small pile of components and instruments via a single thick wire. "Is that it?" said Zaphod in surprise. "That is it." Didn't look too bad, thought Zaphod. "And I get in there, do I?" said Zaphod. "You get in there," said Gagravar, "and I'm afraid you must do it now." Okay, said Zaphod. He opened the door of the box and stepped in. Inside the box, he waited. After 5 seconds, there was a click, and the entire universe was there in the box with him. Chapter 11. The total perspective vortex derives the picture of the whole universe on the principle of extrapolated matter analysis. To explain, every single piece of matter in the universe is in some way affected by every other piece of matter in the universe. It is, in theory, possible to extrapolate the whole of creation, every sun, every planet, their orbits, their composition, and their economic and social history from, say, one piece of small fairy cake. The man who invented the total perspective vortex did so basically in order to annoy his wife. Trin Trigula, for that was his name, was a dreamer, a thinker, a speculative philosopher, or, as his wife would have called it, an idiot. And she would nag him incessantly about the utterly inordinate amount of time he spent staring out into space, or mulling over the mechanics of safety pins, or doing spectrographic analysis of pieces of fairy cake. "Have some sense of proportion," she would say, sometimes as often as 38 times in a single day. And so he built the total perspective vortex, just to show her, and into one end he plugged the whole of reality, as extrapolated from a piece of fairy cake, and into the other end he plugged his wife, so that when he turned it on, she saw in one instant the whole infinity of creation and herself in relation to it. To Trin Trigula's horror, the shock completely annihilated her brain, but to his satisfaction, he realised that he had proved conclusively that if life is going to exist in a universe of this size, then the one thing it cannot afford to have is a sense of proportion. The door of the vortex swung open. From his disembodied mind, Gagravar watched dejectedly. He had rather liked Zaphod Beeblebrox in a strange sort of way. He was clearly a man of many qualities, even if they were mostly bad ones. He waited for him to flop forwards out of the box, as they all did. Instead, he stepped out. "Hi," he said. Beeblebrox, gasped Gagravar's mind in amazement. "Could I have a drink, please?" said Zaphod. You have been in the vortex?" stammered Gagravar. "You saw me, kid." "And it was working?" "Sure was." "And you saw the whole infinity of creation?" "Sure, really neat place, you know that?" Gagravar's mind was reeling in astonishment. Had his body been with him, it would have sat down heavily with its mouth hanging open. "And you saw yourself," said Gagravar, "in relation to it all?" "Oh yeah. But what did you experience?" Zaphod shrugged smugly. "It just told me what I knew all the time. I'm a really terrific and great guy. Didn't I tell you, baby? I'm Zaphod Beeblebrox." His gaze passed over the machinery which powered the vortex and suddenly stopped, startled. He breathed heavily. "Hey," he said, "is that really a piece of fairy cake?" He ripped the small piece of confectionery from the sensors with which it was surrounded. "If I had told you how much I needed this," he said ravenously, "I wouldn't have time to eat it." He ate it. Chapter 12. A short while later he was running across the plain in the direction of the ruined city. The dank air wheezed heavily in his lungs, and he frequently stumbled with the exhaustion he was feeling. Night was beginning to fall too, and the rough ground was treacherous. The elation of his recent experience was still with him, though. The whole universe. He had seen the whole universe stretching to infinity around him. Everything. And with it had come the most clear and extraordinary knowledge that he was the most important thing in it. Having a conceited ego is one thing. Actually being told by a machine is another. He didn't have time to reflect on this matter. Gagravar had told him that he would have to alert his masters as to what happened, but that he was prepared to leave a decent interval before doing so, enough time for Zaphod to make a break and find somewhere to hide. What he was going to do he didn't know, but feeling that he was the most important person in the universe gave him the confidence to believe that something would turn up. Nothing else on this blighted planet could give him much grounds for optimism. He ran on, and soon reached the outskirts of the abandoned city. He walked along along cracked and gaping roads riddled with scrawny weeds, the holes filled with rotting shoes. The buildings he passed were so crumbled and decrepit, he thought it unsafe to enter any of them. Where could he hide? He hurried on. After a while, the remains of a wide sweeping road led off from the one down which he was walking, and at its end lay a vast, low building, surrounded with sundry smaller ones, the whole surrounded by the remains of a perimeter barrier. The large main building seemed reasonably solid, and Zaphod turned off to see if it might provide him with anything. He approached the building. Along one side of it, the front it would seem, since it faced a wide concreted apron area, were 3 gigantic doors, maybe 60 feet high. The far one of these was open, and towards this Zaphod ran. Inside, all was gloom, dust, and confusion. Giant cobwebs lay over everything. Part of the infrastructure of the building had collapsed, part of the rear wall had caved in, and a thick, choking dust lay inches over the floor. Through the heavy gloom, huge shapes loomed, covered with debris. The shapes were sometimes cylindrical, sometimes bulbous, sometimes like eggs, or rather cracked eggs. Most of them were split open or falling apart. Some were mere skeletons. They were all spacecraft, all derelict. Zaphod wandered in frustration among the hulks. There was nothing here that remotely approached the serviceable. Even the mere vibration of his footsteps caused one precarious wreck to collapse further into itself. Towards the rear of the building lay one old ship, slightly larger than the others, and buried beneath even deeper piles of dust and cobwebs. Its outline, however, seemed unbroken. Zaphod approached it with interest, and as he did so, he tripped over an old feed line. He tried to toss the feed line aside, and to his surprise, discovered that it was still connected to the ship. To his utter astonishment, he realised the feed line was also humming slightly. He stared at the ship in disbelief, and then back down at the feed line in his hands. He tore off his jacket and threw it aside. Crawling along on his hands and knees, he followed the feed line to the point where it connected with the ship. The connection was sound, and the slight humming vibration was more distinct. His heart was beating fast. He wiped away some grime and laid an ear against the ship's side. He could only hear a faint, indeterminate noise. He rummaged feverishly amongst the debris lying on the floor all about him, and found a short length of tubing and a non-biodegradable plastic cup. Out of this he fashioned a crude stethoscope and placed it against the side of the ship. What he heard made his brains turn somersaults. The voice said, "Transstellar Cruise Lines would like to apologise to passengers for the continuing delay to this flight. We are currently awaiting the loading of our complement of small lemon-soaked paper towels for your comfort, refreshment and hygiene during the journey. Meanwhile, we thank you for your patience. The cabin crew will shortly be serving coffee and biscuits again." Zaphod staggered backwards, staring wildly at the ship. He walked around for a few moments in a daze. In doing so, he suddenly caught sight of the giant departure board still hanging, but by only one support, from the ceiling above him. It was covered with grime, but some of the figures were still discernible. Zaphod's eyes searched amongst the figures, then made some brief calculations. His eyes widened. 900 years, he breathed to himself. That was how late the ship was. 2 minutes later, he was on board. As he stepped out of the airlock, the air that greeted him was cool and fresh. The air conditioner was still working. The lights were still on. He moved out of the small entrance chamber into a short, narrow corridor and stepped nervously down it. Suddenly, a door opened and a figure stepped out towards him. "Please return to your seat, sir," said the android stewardess, and turning her back on him, she walked down the corridor in front of him. When his heart had started beating again, he followed her. She opened the door at the end of the corridor and walked through. He followed her through the door. They were now in the passenger compartment, and Zaphod's heart stopped still again for a moment. In every seat sat a passenger strapped into his or her seat. The passenger's hair was long and unkempt, their fingernails were long, the men wore beards. All of them were quite clearly alive, but sleeping. Zaphod had the creeping horrors. He walked down the aisles as in a dream. By the time he was halfway down the aisle, the stewardess had reached the other end. She turned and spoke. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," she said sweetly. "Thank you for bearing with us during this slight delay. We will now be taking off as soon as we possibly can. If you would like to wake up now, I will serve you coffee and biscuits." There was a slight hum. At that moment, all the passengers awoke. They awoke screaming and clawing at the straps and life support systems that held them tightly in their seats. They screamed and bawled and hollered till Zaphod thought his ears would shatter. They struggled and writhed as the stewardess patiently moved up the aisle, placing a small cup of coffee and a packet of biscuits in front of each one of them. Then one of them rose from their seat. He turned and looked at Zaphod. Zaphod's skin was crawling all over his body as if it was trying to get off. He turned and ran from the bedlam. He plunged through the door and back into the corridor. The man pursued him. He raced in a frenzy to the end of the corridor, through the entrance chamber and beyond. He arrived on the flight deck, slammed and bolted the door behind him. He leant back against the door, breathing hard. Within seconds, a hand started beating on the door. From somewhere on the flight deck, a metallic voice addressed him. "Passengers are not allowed on the flight deck. Please return to your seat and wait for the ship to take off. Coffee and biscuits are being served. This is your autopilot speaking. Please return to your seat." Zaphod said nothing. He breathed hard behind him. The hand continued to knock on the door. "Please return to your seat," repeated the autopilot. "Passengers are not allowed on the flight deck." "I'm not a passenger," panted Zaphod. "Please return to your seat." "I am not a passenger," shouted Zaphod again. "Please return to your seat." "I am not a... Hello? Can you hear me?" "Please return to your seat." "You're the autopilot?" said Zaphod. "Yes," said the voice from the flight console. "You're in charge of the ship?" "Yes," said the voice again. "There has been a delay. Passengers are to be kept temporarily in suspended animation for their comfort and convenience. Coffee and biscuits are being served every year, after which passengers are returned to suspended animation for their continued comfort and convenience. Departure will take place when the flight stores are complete. We apologize for the delay." Zaphod moved away from the door, on which the pounding had now ceased. He approached the flight console. "Delay?" he cried. "Have you seen the world outside this ship? It's a wasteland, a desert. Civilization's been and gone, man. There are no lemon-soaked paper napkins on the way from anywhere." "The statistical likelihood," continued the autopilot primly, "is that other civilizations will arise. There will one day be lemon-soaked paper napkins. Till then, there will be a short delay. Please return to your seat." But at that moment, the door opened. Zaphod span around to see the man who had pursued him standing there. He carried a large briefcase. He was smartly dressed, and his hair was short. He had no beard and no long fingernails. "Zaphod Beeblebrox," he said. "My name is Zarniwoop. I believe you wanted to see me." Zaphod Beeblebrox wittered. His mouths said foolish things. He dropped into a chair. Oh man, where did you spring from?" he said. "I've been waiting here for you," he said in a businesslike tone. He put the briefcase down and sat in another chair. "I am glad you followed instructions," he said. "I was a bit nervous that you might have left my office by the door rather than the window. Then you would have been in trouble." Zaphod shook his head at him and burbled. "When you entered the door of my office, you entered my electronically synthesized universe," he explained. "If you had left by the door, you would have been back in the real one. The artificial one works from here." He patted the briefcase smugly. Zaphod glared at him with resentment and loathing. "What's the difference?" he muttered. "Nothing," said Zarniwoop. "They are identical. Oh, except that I think the Frogstar fighters are grey in the real universe." "What's going on?" spat Zaphod. "Simple," said Zarniwoop. His self-assurance and smugness made Zaphod seethe. Very simple, repeated Zarniwoop. I discovered the coordinated at which this man coordinates. It's another spelling mistake in the book. I discovered the coordinates at which this man could be found. The man who rules the universe, and discovered that his world was protected by an improbability field. To protect my secret and myself, I retreated to the safety of this totally artificial universe and hid myself away in a forgotten cruise liner. I was secure. Meanwhile, you and I... You and I? Said Zaphod angrily. You mean I knew you? Yes, said Zarniwoop. We knew each other well. I had no taste, said Zaphod, and resumed a sullen silence. Meanwhile, you and I arranged that you would steal the improbability drive ship, the only one which could reach the ruler's world, and bring it to me here. This you have now done, I trust, and I congratulate you. He smiled a tight little smile, which Zaphod wanted to hit with a brick. Oh, and in case you were wondering, said Zarniwoop, this universe was created specifically for you to come to. You are therefore the most important person in this universe. You would never, he said with an even more brickable smile, have survived the total perspective vortex in the real one. Shall we go? Where? Said Zaphod suddenly. He felt collapsed. To your ship, the Heart of Gold. You did bring it, I trust. No. Where is your jacket? Zaphod looked at him in mystification. My jacket? I took it off. It's outside. Good. We will go and find it. Zarniwoop stood up and gestured for Zaphod to follow him. Out in the entrance chamber again, they could hear the screams of the passengers being fed coffee and biscuits. It has not been a pleasant experience waiting for you, said Zarniwoop. Not pleasant for you, bawled Zaphod. How do you think... Zarniwoop held up a silencing finger as the hatchway swung open. A few feet away from them, they could see Zaphod's jacket lying in the debris. A very remarkable and powerful ship, said Zarniwoop. Watch. As they watched, the pocket on the jacket suddenly bulged. It split, it ripped. The small metal model of the Heart of Gold that Zaphod had been bewildered to discover in his pocket was growing. It grew. It continued to grow. It reached, after 2 minutes, its full size. At an improbability level, said Zarniwoop, of... Oh, I don't know. But something very large. You mean I had it with me all this time? Zarniwoop smiled. He lifted up his briefcase and opened it. Twisted a single switch inside of it. Goodbye, artificial universe, he said. Hello, real one. The scene before them shimmered briefly and reappeared exactly as before. You see? Said Zarniwoop. Exactly the same. You mean, repeated Zaphod tautly, that I had it with me all this time? Oh yes, said Zarniwoop. Of course, that was the whole point. That's it, said Zaphod. You can count me out. From here on in, you can count me out. I've had all I want of this. You play your own games. I'm afraid you cannot leave, said Zarniwoop. You are entwined in the improbability field. You cannot escape. He smiled the smile that Zaphod had wanted to hit, and this time, Zaphod hit it. Hee. I'm glad. I do not like Zarniwoop at all. Smarmy, stupid, corporate bastard. Anyway, Chapter 13. Ford Prefect bounded up the bridge of the Heart of Gold. Trillian! Arthur! He shouted. It's working! The ship's reactivated! Trillian and Arthur were asleep on the floor. Come on, you guys, we're going off! We're taking off! He said, kicking them awake. Hey there, guys! Twittered the computer. It's really great to be back with you again, I can tell you, and I just want to say that... Shut up, said Ford. Tell us where the hell we are. Frogstar World B, and man, it's a dump! Oh, that was Zaphod. Frogstar World B, and man, it's a dump, said Zaphod, running up the bridge. Hi guys, you must be so amazingly glad to see me you can't even find words to tell me what a cool fruit I am. What a what? Said Arthur blearily, picking himself up from the floor and not taking any of this in. I know how you feel, said Zaphod. I'm so great even I get tongue-tied talking to myself. Hey, it's good to see you, Trillian, Ford, Monkey Man. Hey, computer? Hi there, Mr. Beeblebrox, sir. Sure is an honor to... Shut up and get us the hell out of here. Fast, fast, fast. Sure thing, fella. Where do you want to go? Anywhere. Doesn't matter, shouted Zaphod. Yes, it does, he said again. We want to go to the nearest place to eat. Sure thing, said the computer happily, and a massive explosion rocked the bridge. When Zarniwoop entered a minute or so later with a black eye, he regarded the 4 wisps of smoke with interest. 4 inert bodies sank through spinning blackness. Consciousness had died. Cold oblivion pulled the bodies down and down into the pit of unbeing. The roar of silence echoed dismally around them, and they sank at last into a dark, bitter sea of heaving red that slowly engulfed them, seemingly forever. After what seemed an eternity, the sea receded and left them lying on a cold, hard shore, the flotsam and jetsam of the stream of life, the universe, and everything. Cold spasms shook them, lights danced sickeningly around them. The cold, hard shore tipped and span and then stood still. It shone darkly. It was a very highly polished, cold, hard shore. A green blur watched them disapprovingly. It coughed. Good evening, madam, gentlemen, it said. Do you have a reservation? Ford Prefect's consciousness snapped back like elastic, making his brain smart. He looked up woozily at the green blur. Reservation? He said weakly. Yes, sir, said the green blur. Do you need a reservation for the afterlife? Insofar as it was possible for a green blur to arch its eyebrows disdainfully, this is what the green blur now did. Afterlife, sir? It said. Arthur Dent was grappling at his consciousness, the way one grapples with a lost bar of soap in the bath. Is this the afterlife? He stammered. Well, I assume so, said Ford Prefect, trying to work out which way was up. He tested the theory that it must lie in the opposite direction from the cold hard shore on which he was lying, and staggered to what he hoped were his feet. I mean, he said, swaying gently, there's no other way we could have survived the blast, is there? No, muttered Arthur. He had raised himself up onto his elbows, but it didn't seem to improve things. He slumped down again. No, said Trillian, standing up. No way at all. A dull, hoarse gurgling sound came from the floor. It was Zaphod Beeblebrox attempting to speak. I certainly didn't survive, he gurgled. I was a total goner. Wham, bang, and that was it. Yeah, thanks to you, said Ford. We didn't stand a chance. We must have been blown to bits. Arms, legs, everywhere. Yeah, said Zaphod, struggling noisily to his feet. If the lady and gentleman would like to order drinks, said the green blur, hovering patiently beside them. Kerplow, splat, continued Zaphod, instantaneously zonked into our component molecules. Hey, Ford, he said, identifying one of the slowly solidifying blurs around him. Did you get that thing of the whole life flashing before you? You got that too, said Ford. Your whole life? Yeah, said Zaphod. At least I assume it was mine. I spent a lot of time out of my skulls, you know. He looked around him at the various shapes that were becoming proper shapes instead of vague and wobbling, shapeless shapes. So, he said. So what? Said Ford. So here we are, said Zaphod hesitantly, lying dead. Standing, Trillian corrected him. Standing dead, continued Zaphod, in this desolate restaurant, said Arthur Dent, who had gotten to his feet and could now, much to his surprise, see clearly. That is to say, the thing that surprised him was not that he could see, but what he could see. Here we are, continued Zaphod doggedly, standing dead in this desolate 5-star, said Trillian. Restaurant, concluded Zaphod. Odd, isn't it? Said Ford. Yeah. Nice chandeliers, though, said Trillian. They looked about themselves in bemusement. It's not so much an afterlife, said Arthur. More a sort of après-vie. The chandeliers were in fact a little on the flashy side, and the low vaulted ceiling from which they hung would not, in an ideal universe, have been painted in that particular shade of deep turquoise. And even if it had been, it wouldn't have been highlighted by concealed mood lighting. This is not, however, an ideal universe, as was further evidenced by the eye-crossing patterns on the inlaid marble floor, and the way which the fronting for the 80-yard-long marble-topped bar had been made. The fronting for the 80-yard-long marble-topped bar had been made by stitching together nearly 20,000 Antarian mosaic lizard skins, despite the fact that the 20,000 lizards concerned had needed them to keep their insides in. A few smartly dressed creatures were lounging casually at the bar or relaxing in the richly coloured body-hugging seats that were deployed here and there about the bar area. A young Vlahurg officer and his green steaming young lady passed through the large smoked glass doors at the far end of the bar into the dazzling light of the main body of the restaurant beyond. Behind Arthur was a large curtained bay window. He pulled aside the corner of the curtain and looked out at the landscape, which under normal circumstances would have given Arthur the creeping horrors. These were not, however, normal circumstances, for the thing that froze his blood and made his skin try to crawl up his back and off the top of his head was the sky. The sky was... An attendant flunky politely drew the curtain back into place. "All in good time, sir," he said. Zaphod's eyes flashed. "Hey, hang about, you dead guys," he said. "I think we're missing somebody. Some ultra-important thing here, you know? Something somebody said and we missed it." Arthur was profoundly relieved to turn his attention from what he had just seen. He said, "I said it was some sort of Yeah, and don't you wish you hadn't?" said Zaphod. "Ford?" "I said it was odd." "Yeah, shrewd but dull, perhaps it was." "Perhaps," interrupted the green blur, who had by this time resolved into the shape of a small, wizened, dark-suited green waiter. "Perhaps you would care to discuss the matter over drinks." "Drinks!" cried Zaphod. "That was it! See what you miss if you don't stay alert." "Indeed, sir," said the waiter patiently. "If the lady and gentleman would care to order drinks before dinner..." "Dinner!" Zaphod exclaimed with passion. "Listen, little green person, my stomach could take you home and cuddle you all night for the mere idea." "And the universe," concluded the waiter, determined not to be deflected on his home stretch, "will explode later for your pleasure." Ford's head swiveled towards him. He spoke with feeling. "Wow," he said. "What sort of drinks do you serve in this place?" The waiter laughed a polite little waiter's laugh. "Ah," he said, "I think sir has perhaps misunderstood me." "Oh, I hope not," breathed Ford. The waiter coughed a polite little waiter's cough. "It is not unusual for our customers to be a little disoriented by the time journey," he said, "so if I might suggest..." "Time journey?" said Zaphod. "Time journey?" said Ford. "Time journey?" said Trillian. "You mean this isn't the afterlife?" said Arthur. The waiter smiled a polite little waiter's smile. He had almost exhausted his polite little waiter repertoire and would soon be slipping into his role of a rather tight-lipped and sarcastic little waiter. "Afterlife, sir?" he said. "No, sir." "And we're not dead," said Arthur. The waiter tightened his lips. "Ah ha," he said. "Sir is most evidently alive, otherwise I would not attempt to serve, sir." In an extraordinary gesture which is pointless attempting to describe, Zaphod Beeblebrox slapped both his foreheads with two of his arms and one of his thighs with the other. "Hey guys," he said, "this is crazy. We finally did it. We finally got to where we were going. This is Milliways." "Yes, sir," said the waiter, laying on the patients with a trowel. "This is Milliways, the restaurant at the end of the universe." "End of what?" "Oh, thank you, Sniper. I appreciate it. I'll get around to it sometime, or you can virtually mail it to me through the internet. Just a nice slice of electronically formed pizza. I hope you enjoyed it, though. What kind of pizza did you make? I've got a Discord server, but I've not got it really up and running yet, so I don't give it out. "End of what?" said Arthur. "The universe," repeated the waiter, very clearly and unnecessarily distinctly. "When did that end?" said Arthur. "In just a few minutes, sir," said the waiter. He took a deep breath. He didn't need to do this since his body was supplied with the peculiar assortment of gases it required, from a small intravenous device strapped to his leg. There are times, however, when whatever your metabolism, you have to take a deep breath. Now, if you would care to order drinks at last, he said, I will then show you to your table. Yeah, I've made a Discord server, but I'm not giving it out just yet because I want to get it all set up and looking nice or something. So that's about it. So I don't personally give out my Discord info. Blah 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 blah. Where were we? Now, if you would care to order drinks at last, he said, then I will show you to your... Oh, also, hey Evie. Sorry. Then I will show you to your table. Zaphod grinned 2 manic grins, sauntered over to the bar, and bought most of it. Chapter 15. Well, yeah, that, and I mean, I've got about 5 people that would join, if that, and they're all like personal friends of mine, so it's not in any particular dire state of needing mods at the moment, but oh well. Chapter 15. The restaurant at the end of the universe is one of the most extraordinary ventures in the entire history of catering. It has been built on the fragmented remains of... It will be built on the fragmented... That is to say, it will have been built by this time, and indeed it has been... One of the major problems encountered in time travel is not that of an accident becoming your own father or mother. There is no problem involved in becoming your own father or mother that a broad-minded and well-adjusted family can't cope with. Not sure I agree with that, but... There is also no problem about changing the course of history. The course of history does not change because it all fits together like a jigsaw. All the important changes have happened before the things they were supposed to change, and it all sorts itself out in the end. Well, I hope your Discord server's going well, in which case. I hope you've got it more sorted out than I have. The major problem is quite simply one of grammar, and the main work to consult in this matter is Dr. Dan Street Mentioner's Time Traveller's Handbook of 1001 Tense Formations. It will tell you, for instance, how to describe something that was about to happen to you in the past before you avoided it by time jumping forward 2 days in order to avoid it. The event will be described differently according to whether you are talking about it from the standpoint of your own natural time, from a time in the further future, or a time in the further past, and is further complicated by the possibility of conducting conversations whilst you are actually travelling from one time to another with the intention of becoming your own father or mother. That bit hurt my head. I don't know how to delete a chat either at the moment, so I can't help you there. Most readers get as far as the future semi-conditionally modified subinverted plagal past subjunctive intentional before giving up, and in fact later editions of the book, all the pages beyond this point have been left blank to save on printing costs. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy skips lightly over this tangle of academic abstraction, pausing only to note that the term future perfect has been abandoned since it was discovered not to be. To resume, the restaurant at the end of the universe is one of the most extraordinary ventures in the entire history of catering. It is built on the fragmented remains of an eventually ruined planet we will have and be, enclosed in a vast time bubble and projected forward in time to the precise moment of the end of the universe. This is, many would say, impossible. In it, guests willan on take, their places at table and eat, willan on eat, sumptuous meals whilst watching, watchin', the whole of creation explode around them. This is, many would say, equally impossible. You can arrive, mayan arriven on when, for any sitting you may like without prior, late for when, reservation, because you can book retrospectively, as it were, when you return to your own time. You can have on book, have enter, for when, presuming, returning, winter, retro home. I'm not. I like that bit. Anyway, this is, many would now insist, absolutely impossible. At the restaurant, you can meet and dine with Mayan meeten con with dinen on wen, a fascinating cross-section of the entire population of space and time. This, it can be explained patiently, is also impossible. You can visit it as many times as you like, Mayon on visit, Rion visiting, and so on. For further tense corrections, consult Dr. Street Mentioner's book. And be sure of never meeting yourself, because of the embarrassment this usually causes. This, even if the rest were true, which it isn't, is patently impossible, say the doubters. All you have to do is deposit 1 penny in a savings account in your own era, and when you arrive at the end of time, the operation of compound interest means that the fabulous cost of your meal has been paid for. This, many claim, is not merely impossible, but clearly insane, which is why the advertising executives of the star system of Bastablom came up with this slogan. If you done 6 impossible things this morning, why not round it off with a breakfast at Milliways, the restaurant at the end of the universe? Oh, what's that dog? Man, he's French. Dog. Whiff. I assume I pronounced that correctly. Chapter 16. At the bar, Zaphod was rapidly becoming as tired as a newt. His heads knocked together, and his smiles were coming out of sync. He was miserably happy. Zaphod, said Ford, whilst you're still capable of speech, would you care to tell me what the photon happened? Where have you been? Where have we been? Small matter, but I'd like it cleared up. It's got a lot of pages because it's 5 books. And we're on the second one. Zaphod's left head sobered up, leaving his right to sink further into the obscurity of drink. Yeah, it was originally, and this is one of my favourite subjects actually, because I'm a nerd. It was originally a radio show made back in 1978 by Douglas Adams, and it was performed by a really good cast, who I think some of whom have passed away, but some of them are still around for today, and they've done like a lot of travelling radio shows and stuff like that, and they're all really good, and it's actually where I try to base my own voices on, but because I'm only one person, I have a very limited range. But those are always the voices I think of. And then in 1979, Douglas Adams developed a book based on the radio show and sort of like expanded the whole thing. And the original show was made up of, I think it was 8 parts? No. 5 parts, but they were 5 parts, but 12 fits. Or maybe it was 24 fits. I don't know. I've got all the radio shows on my audiobook app anyway, and they're all really good. But not the actual reading of the book, just the radio show. But it's really good. I really like it. Let's see. Zaphod's left head sobered up, leaving his right to sink further into the obscurity of drink. And no, the books aren't all that thick. It's 5 books, but they're all very thin. It's like, I think 200 pages in each. And at the moment, I'm reading off of a PDF viewer, so... But I've got the hard copies of the books. Yeah, he said. I've been around. They want me to find the man who rules the universe. But I don't care to meet him. I believe the man can't cook. His left head watched the right head saying this and then nodded. True, it said. Have another drink. Ford had another Pangalactic Gargle Blaster, the drink which has been described as the alcoholic equivalent of a mugging, expensive and bad for the head. Whatever had happened, Ford decided, he didn't really care too much. Listen, Ford, said Zaphod. Everything's cool and fruity. That's fruity, not fruity. F-R-O-O-D-Y. It means very cool and together. You mean everything's under control? No, said Zaphod. I do not mean everything's under control. That would not be cool and fruity. If you want to know what's happened, let's just say I had the whole situation in my pocket, okay? Ford shrugged. Zaphod giggled into his drink. It frothed up over the side of the glass and started to eat its way into the marble bar top. A wild-skinned sky gypsy approached them and played electric violin at them until Zaphod gave him lots of money, and he agreed to go away again. The gypsy approached Arthur and Trillian sitting in another part of the bar. I don't know what this place is, said Arthur, but I think it gives me the creeps. Have another drink, said Trillian. Enjoy yourself. Which, said Arthur, the two are mutually exclusive. Poor Arthur, you're really not cut out for this, are you? Call this life? You're beginning to sound like Marvin. Marvin's the clearest thinker I know. How do you think we make this violinist go away? The waiter approached. Your table is ready, he said. Seen from the outside, which it never is, the restaurant resembles a giant glittering starfish beached on a forgotten rock. Each of its arms houses the bars, the kitchens, the force field generators which protect the entire structure, and the decayed planet on which it sits, and the time turbines which slowly rock the whole affair backwards and forwards across the crucial moment. In the centre sits the gigantic golden dome, almost a complete globe, and it was into this area that Zaphod, Ford, Arthur and Trillian now passed. It glitched for me, and you read, I'm seeking the man who is the... Oh, right. Whoops. Yeah. I think if anyone misses pretty much any of this book, it can end up really sort of screwed up, generally. Because it's very long and very complicated, and it's hard to keep track of. At least 5 tons of glitter had already gone into it before them, and covered every available surface. The other surfaces were not available because they were already encrusted with jewels, precious seashells from Santragan. A lot of words I don't usually say in one sitting. The other surfaces were not available because they were already encrusted with jewels, precious seashells from Santragenius, gold leaf, mosaic tiles, lizard skins, and a million unidentifiable embellishments and decorations. Glass glittered, silver shone, gold gleamed. Arthur Dent goggled. Wowee, said Zaphod. Zappo. Incredible, breathed Arthur. The people, the things. The things, said Ford Prefect quietly, are also people. The people, resumed Arthur. The other people. The lights, said Trillian. The tables, said Arthur. The clothes, said Trillian. The waiter thought they sounded like a couple of bailiffs. The end of the universe is very popular, said Zaphod, threading his way unsteadily through the throng of tables. Some made of marble, some of rich ultra-mahogany, some even of platinum, and at each a party of exotic creatures chatting amongst themselves and studying menus. People like to dress up for it, continued Zaphod. Gives it a sense of occasion. The tables were fanned out in a large circle around the central stage area, where a small band were playing light music. At least 1,000 tables was Arthur's guests, and interspersed amongst them were swaying palms, hissing fountains, grotesque statuary. In short, all the paraphernalia common to all restaurants, where little expense has been spared to give the impression that no expense has been spared. Arthur glanced around, half expecting to see someone making an American Express commercial. Zaphod lurched into Ford, who lurched back into Zaphod. Wowee, said Zaphod. Zappo, said Ford. My great-granddaddy must have really screwed up the computer's works, you know, said Zaphod. I told it to take us to the nearest place to eat, and it sends us to the end of the universe. Remind me to be nice to it one day. He paused. Hey, everybody's here, you know. Everybody who was anybody. Was? Said Arthur. At the end of the universe, you have to use the past tense a lot, said Zaphod. 'Cause everything's been done, you know. Hi, guys, he called out to a nearby party of giant iguana life forms. How did you do? Is that Zaphod Beeblebrox? Asked one iguana of another iguana. I think so, replied the second iguana. Well, doesn't that just take the biscuit? Said the first iguana. Funny old thing, life, said the second iguana. It's what you make of it, said the first, and they lapsed back into silence. They were waiting for the greatest show in the universe. Hey, Zaphod, said Ford, grabbing for his arm, and on account of the third Pengalactic Gargle Blaster missing, he pointed a swaying finger. There's an old mate of mine, he said. Hot Black Desiato. See the man at the platinum table with the platinum suit on? Zaphod tried to follow Ford's finger with his eyes, but it made him feel dizzy. Finally, he saw. Oh yeah, he said, then the recognition came a moment later. Hey, he said, did that guy ever make it mega big? Wow, bigger than the biggest thing ever, other than me. Who's he supposed to be? Asked Trillian. Hot Black Desiato? Desiato? Said Zaphod in astonishment. You don't know? You never heard of Disaster Area? No, said Trillian, who hadn't. The biggest, said Ford. Loudest. Richest, suggested Zaphod. Rock band in the history of... He searched for the word. History itself, said Zaphod. No, said Trillian. Zowie, said Zaphod. Here we are at the end of the universe, and you haven't even lived yet. Did you miss out? He led her off to where the waiter had been waiting all this time at the table. Arthur followed them, feeling very lost and alone. Ford waded back through the throng to renew an old acquaintance. Hey, Hot Black, he called out. How are you doing? Great to see you, big boy. How's the noise? You're looking great. Really very, very fat and unwell. Amazing. He slapped the man on the back and was mildly surprised to see that it seemed to elicit no response. The Pangalactic Gargle Blasters swirling around inside him told him to plunge on regardless. Remember the old days? He said. We used to hang out, right? The Bistro Illegal, remember? Slim's Throat Emporium? The Evil Drone Boozerama? Great days, eh? Hot Black Desiato offered no opinion as to whether or not they were great days. Ford was not perturbed. And when we were hungry, we'd pose as public health inspectors, you remember that? And go around confiscating meals and drinks, right? Till we got food poisoning. Oh, and then there were the long nights of talking and drinking in those smelly rooms above the Café Lou in Gretchentown, when you Beetle. And you were always in the next room trying to write songs on your agitar, and we all hated them. And you said you didn't care, and we said we did it because we hated them so much. Ford's eyes were beginning to mist over. And you said you didn't want to be a star, he continued, wallowing in nostalgia, because you despised the star system. And we said Hadra and Saligi and me, that we didn't think you had the option. And what do you do now? You buy star systems. He turned and solicited the attention of those at the nearby tables. Here, he said, is a man who buys star systems. Hot Black Desiato made no attempt to either confirm or deny this fact, and the attention of the temporary audience waned rapidly. I think someone's drunk, muttered a purple bush-like being into his wine glass. Ford staggered slightly and sat down heavily on the chair facing Hot Black Desiato. What's that number you do? He said, unwisely grabbing at a bottle for support and tipping it over, into a nearby glass as it happened. Not to waste a happy accident, he drained the glass. That really huge number, he continued. How does it go? Bwam, bwam, ba-da. Something. And in the stage act, you usually, when you do it, it ends up with the ship crashing right into the sun, and you actually do it. Ford crashed his fist into the other hand to illustrate this feat graphically. He knocked the bottle over again. Ship, sun, wham, bang, he cried. I mean, forget lasers and stuff. You guys are into solar flares and real sunburn. Oh, and terrible songs. His eyes followed the stream of liquid glugging out of the bottle on the table. Something ought to be done about it, he thought. Hey, you want a drink? He said. It began to sink into his squelching mind that something was missing from this reunion, and that the missing something was in some way connected with the fact that the fat man sitting opposite him in the platinum suit and the silver trilby had not yet said, Hi, Ford, or Great to see you after all this time, or, in fact, anything at all. More to the point, he had not yet even moved. Hot Black? Said Ford. A large meaty hand landed on his shoulder from behind and pushed him aside. He slid gracelessly off his seat and peered upwards to see if he could spot the owner of that discourteous hand. The owner was not hard to spot on account of his being something of the order of 7 feet tall, and not slightly built with it. In fact, he was built the way one builds leather sofas, shiny, lumpy, and with lots of solid stuffing. The suit into which the man's body had been stuffed looked as though its only purpose in life was to demonstrate how difficult it was to get this sort of body into a suit. The face had a texture of an orange and the colour of an apple, but there the resemblance to anything sweet ended. "Kid?" said a voice which emerged from the man's mouth as if it had been having a really rough time down in his chest. "Hello, Joseph. Nice to have a Joe Star here with us. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us." Yeah," said Ford conversationally. He staggered back to his feet again and was disappointed that the top of his head didn't come further up the man's body. "Beat it," said the man. "Well, I hope things are going okay, even if they are Norm. I hope they're a good kind of Norm, you know?" Yeah. Beat it," said the man. "Oh yeah?" said Ford, wondering how wise he was being. "And who are you?" The man considered this for a moment. He wasn't used to being asked this sort of question. Nevertheless, after a while, he came up with an answer. "I'm the guy who's telling you to beat it," he said, "before you get it beaten for you." "Now listen," said Ford nervously. He wished his head would stop spinning, settle down and get to grips with the situation. "Now listen," he continued, "I am one of Hot Black's oldest friends and—" He glanced at Hot Black Desiato, who hadn't moved so much as an eyelash. "And," said Ford again, wondering what would be a good word to say after "and." The large man came up with a whole sentence to go after "and." He said it. "And I am Mr. Desiato's bodyguard." It went. "And I am responsible for his body, and I am not responsible for yours. So take it away before it gets damaged." "Now wait a minute," said Ford. "No minutes," boomed the bodyguard. "No waiting. Mr. Desiato speaks to no one." "Well, perhaps you'd let him say what he thinks about the matter himself," said Ford. "He speaks to no one," bellowed the bodyguard. Ford glanced anxiously at Hot Black again and was forced to admit to himself that the bodyguard seemed to have the facts on his side. There was not the slightest sign of movement, let alone keen interest in Ford's welfare. "Why?" said Ford. "What's the matter with him?" The bodyguard told him. Chapter 17. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy notes that a disaster area, a plutonium rock band from the Gagraka mine zones, are generally held to be not only the loudest rock band in the galaxy, but in fact the loudest noise of any kind at all. Regular concert goers judge that the best sound balance is usually to be heard from within large concrete bunkers some 37 miles from the stage, whilst the musicians themselves play their instruments by remote control from within a heavily insulated spaceship which stays in orbit around the planet, or more frequently around a completely different planet. Their songs are, on the whole, very simple and mostly follow the familiar theme boy being meets girl being beneath a silvery moon. I hope everything's okay. I get issues with Twitch sometimes too, but... Well, sorry about that. I don't know what went wrong, but everything seems okay here, so I can't really help on that matter. But thanks for coming back. Their songs are on the whole very simple and mostly follow the familiar theme of boy being meets girl being beneath a silvery moon, which then explodes for no adequately explored reason. Many worlds have now banned their act altogether, sometimes for artistic reasons, but most commonly because the band's public address system contravenes local strategic arms limitations treaties. This has not, however, stopped the earnings from pushing back the boundaries of pure hypermathematics, and their chief research accountant has recently been appointed Professor of Neomathematics at the University of Maximegalon in recognition of both his general and his special theories of disaster area tax returns, in which he proves that the whole fabric of the space-time continuum is not merely curved, it is in fact totally bent. Oh crap. A second. Pressed enter and now everything is gone. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. Sorry. I hope you beat it soon then. What game is it? Come on. Which way? Right. Ford staggered back to the table where Zaphod, Arthur and Trillian were sitting waiting for the fun to begin. Gotta have some food, said Ford. Oh wait, sorry. Gotta have some food, said Ford. Hi, Ford, said Zaphod. You speak to the big noise boy? Ford waggled his head noncommittally. Hot Black? I sort of spoke to him, yeah. What'd he say? It's a bad game. Why are you playing it then? Well, he's not a lot, really. He's, yeah? He's spending a year dead for tax reasons. I've got to sit down. He sat down. The waiter approached. Would you like to see the menu? He said. Or would you like to meet the dish of the day? Huh? Said Ford. Huh? Said Arthur. Huh? Said Trillian. That's cool, said Zaphod. We'll meet the meat. In a small room in one of the arms of the restaurant complex, a tall, thin, gangling figure pulled aside a curtain and Oblivion looked him in the face. It was not a pretty face, perhaps because Oblivion had looked him in it so many times. It was too long for a start. The eyes too sunken and too hooded, the cheeks too hollow, his lips were too thin and too long, and when they parted his teeth looked too much like a recently polished bay window. The hands that held the curtain were long and thin too. They were also cold. They lay lightly along the folds of the curtain and gave the impression that if he didn't watch them like a hawk, they would crawl away of their own accord and do something unspeakable in a corner. He let the curtain drop, and the terrible light that played on his features went off to play somewhere more healthy. He prowled around his small chamber like a mantis contemplating an evening's praying, finally settling on a rickety chair by a trestle table, where he leafed through a few sheets of jokes. A bell rang. He pushed the thin sheaf papers aside and stood up. His hands brushed limply over some of the 1 million rainbow-coloured sequins with which his jacket was festooned, and he was gone through the door. Oh, the name is Bad Game. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm fond of my eyes as well. I mean, they change as well, so, you know. I can alter them just a bit. Because they're meant to be playing cards. Oh, for God's sake. Yeah. So now they're spades. They go slightly dim. And just nothing at all when I'm kind of grossed out, I guess. But yeah, I'm very fond of all my cool little additions. I smile at a lot of things, but it's not very difficult to make me smile. Plus, I'm reading my favourite book, so I do smile a lot. In the restaurant, the lights dimmed, the band quickened its pace, a single spotlight stabbed down into the darkness of the stairway that led up the centre of the stage. Yeah, sadly, I only really smile when I'm just, or where I stopped smiling when I'm like... It might also be the calibration, but... Yeah, a second. Yeah. Now I'm not so happy. See? I can be angry when I need to. Just don't annoy me. Now I just sound like Marge Simpson. Homie! That was terrible. Anyway. In the restaurant, the lights dimmed. The band quickened its pace. A single spotlight stabbed down into the darkness of the stairway that led up to the centre of the stage. Up the stairs bounded a tall, brilliantly coloured figure. He burst onto the stage, tripped lightly up to the microphone, and removed it from its stand with one swoop of his long, thin hand, and stood for a moment bowing left and right to his audience, acknowledging their applause, and displaying to them his bay window. He waved to his particular friends in the audience, even though there weren't any there, and he waited for the applause to die down. He held up his hand and smiled a smile that stretched not merely from ear to ear, but seemed to extend some way beyond the mere confines of his face. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen," he cried. "Thank you very much. Thank you so much." He eyed them with a twinkling eye. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, The universe as we know it has now been in existence for over 170,000 million billion years, and will be ending in a little over half an hour. So welcome one and all to Milliways, the restaurant at the end of the universe. With a gesture, he deftly conjured another round of spontaneous applause. With another gesture, he cut it. I am your host for tonight, he said. My name is Max Quartlepleen. Everybody knew this. His act was famous throughout the known galaxy, but he said it for the fresh applause it generated, which he acknowledged with a disclaiming smile and wave. Oh yeah, I did it. Whoops, thank you. Yeah. I used to make that face whenever Dad took away my phone. And I've just come straight from the very other end of time, where I've been hosting a show at the Big Bang Burger Bar, where I can tell you, we have had a very exciting evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I will be with you right through this historic occasion, the end of history itself. No, it's just the story. I mean, I can end in 30 minutes, but at least I have like a few people watching, so, you know. I'm usually here for about 2-3 hours, so depending on how well my throat holds out. But I think I'm getting better at reading for longer periods. Plus, I tend to, it's not a good habit to get into, but I tend to read out loud if I'm alone now instead of reading in my own head, because I like practicing voices. I don't know what AKA in the Monument to the Battle of the Nations means. But yeah, I'm not going anywhere yet, don't worry. I'm glad you're enjoying it though, or that you were so worried that I was ending. So thank you for that. That makes me feel good. Another burst of applause died away quickly as the lights dimmed down further. On every table, candles ignited themselves spontaneously. I'm glad. I hope to keep entertaining. I've got other books planned as well, but because Hitchhikers is quite dense and continues on from itself and references itself so often, I kind of worry that if I stopped reading Hitchhiker's Guide, then the 3 people that watch might not actually know what was going on, you know? I mean, there's always the VODs, I guess, but I don't know. There's also me. I'm kind of worried that I might forget the voices I've done. But then again, I could always go back and watch the VODs and try to do that, so I don't know. But I've got Terry Pratchett's books that I want to do as well. And I've also got the Red Dwarf books, because I'm a fan of the old Red Dwarf TV show. I need to get some Harry Potter books. I've not actually... I mean, I've read a couple of them, but I was never really a big fan beyond... I don't remember the second one, I think, because I like Griffins. But that was the last one I read, because it didn't really sort of stick with me. But, yeah. Maybe it's just because I'm a dumb kid. Yeah, Chamber of Secrets, that's the one. And you guys, I don't know if you're American or not, but I also know that we call it the Philosopher's Stone, and you guys call it the Sorcerer's Stone. So that would be another thing. 69, nice. The sex number. Yeah, I'll have to look into it. If people want to hear Harry Potter, then yeah. Another burst of applause died away quickly as the lights dimmed down further. On every table, candles ignited themselves spontaneously, eliciting a slight gasp from all the diners and wreathing them in 1,000 tiny flickering lights and 1,000,000 intimate shadows. A tremor of excitement thrilled through the darkened restaurant as the vast golden dome above them began very slowly to dim, to darken, to fade. Well, at least it'll be a British book if I get it. Max's voice was hushed as he continued. So, ladies and gentlemen, he breathed, the candles are lit, the band plays softly, and as the force-shielded dome above us fades into transparency, revealing a dark and sullen sky hung heavy with the ancient light of livid, swollen stars, I can see we're all in for a fabulous evening's apocalypse. Even the soft tootling of the band faded away as a stunned shock descended on all those who had not seen this sight before. a monstrous, grisly light poured in on them. A hideous light. A boiling, pestilential light. I don't think I've ever seen that word before. Hey, Nico, how you doing? The Book of 42. Well, I'm reading the second book of 42, so I guess you call it the Book of 43. But yeah, this is the restaurant at the end of the universe. The second book in the Hitchhiker's Guide trilogy. Quote unquote. A monstrous grisly light poured in on them. A hideous light. A boiling I can't read this word. Pestilential light. Which I guess just means pestilence-filled or pestilence-like. A light that would have disfigured hell. The universe was coming to an end. For a few interminable... Oh, I hope the D&D went good. Is it just D&D, or do you use a certain rule set? Or a certain gameplay style thing? I can't remember what they're called. Like Pathfinder or D&D or whatever the other one is. Because there's like a billion, aren't there? For a few interminable seconds, the restaurant spanned silently through the raging void. Then Max spoke again. For those of you who ever hoped to see the light at the end of the tunnel, he said. This is it. The band struck up again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, cried Max. I'll be back with you again in just a moment, and meanwhile, I leave you in the very capable hands of Mr. Reg Nullify and his cataclysmic combo. Big hand, please, ladies and gentlemen, for Reg and the boys. A baleful turmoil of the skies continued. Hesitantly, the audience began to clap after a moment or so. Normal conversation... I'm losing my trail. Hesitantly, the audience began to clap, and after a moment or so, normal conversation resumed. Max began his round of the tables, swapping jokes, shouting with laughter, earning his living. A large dairy animal approached Zaphod Beeblebrox's table. A large, fat, meaty quadruped of the bovine type, with large, watery eyes, small horns, and what might almost have been an ingratiating smile on its lips. Good evening. It lowed and sat back heavily on its haunches. I am the main dish of the day. May I interest you in parts of my body? It harumphed and gurgled a bit, wriggled its hindquarters onto a more comfortable position, and gazed peacefully at them. I know... I won't make that joke. I was going to say, I know people who would be into that, and that just makes me go, ugh. Its gaze was met by looks of startled bewilderment from Arthur and Trillian, a resigned shrug from Ford Prefect, and naked hunger from Zaphod Beeblebrox. Something off the shoulder, perhaps, suggested the animal. Braised in a white wine sauce. Your shoulder, said Arthur in a horrified whisper. But naturally my shoulder, sir, mooed the animal contently. Nobody else's is mine to offer. Zaphod leapt to his feet and started prodding and feeling the animal's shoulder appreciatively. Or the rump is very good, murmured the animal. I've been exercising it and eating plenty of grain, so there's a lot of good meat there. It gave a mellow grunt, gurgled again, and started to chew the cud. It swallowed the cud again. Or a casserole of me, perhaps, it added. You mean this animal actually wants us to eat it? Whispered Trillian to Ford. Me? Said Ford with a glazed look in his eyes. I don't mean anything. That's absolutely horrible, exclaimed Arthur. The most revolting thing I've ever heard. What's the problem, Earthman? Said Zaphod, now transferring his attention to the animal's enormous rump. I just don't want to eat an animal that's standing here inviting me to, said Arthur. It's heartless. Better than eating an animal that doesn't want to be eaten, said Zaphod. That's not the point, Arthur protested. Then he thought about it for a moment. All right, he said. Maybe it is the point. I don't care. I'm not going to think about it now. I'll just, The universe raged about him in its death throes. I think I'll just have a green salad, he muttered. May I urge you to consider my liver? Asked the animal. It must be very rich and tender by now. I've been force-feeding myself for months. I'm not... A green salad, said Arthur emphatically. A green salad? Said the animal, rolling its eyes disapprovingly at Arthur. Are you going to tell me, said Arthur, that I shouldn't have green salad? Well, said the animal, I know many vegetables that are very clear on that point, which is why it was eventually decided to cut through the whole tangled problem and breed an animal that actually wanted to be eaten, and was capable of saying so clearly and distinctly, and here I am. It managed a slight bow. Glass of water, please, said Arthur. Look, said Zaphod, we want to eat. We don't want to make a meal of the issues. 4 rare steaks, please, and hurry. We haven't eaten in 576,000 million years. The animal staggered to its feet. It gave a mellow gurgle. A very wise choice, sir, if I may say so. Very good, it said. I'll just nip off and shoot myself. He turned and gave a friendly wink to Arthur. Don't worry, sir, he said. I'll be very humane. It waddled unhurriedly off into the kitchen. A matter of minutes later, the waiter arrived with 4 huge steaming steaks. Zaphod and Ford wolfed straight into them without a second's hesitation. Trillian paused and then shrugged and started to eat hers. Arthur stared at his, feeling slightly ill. Hey, Earthman, said Zaphod with a malicious grin on his face that wasn't stuffing itself. What's eating you? And the band played on. All around the restaurant, people and things relaxed and chatted. The air was filled with talk of this and that, and with the mingled sense of exotic plants, extravagant food, and insidious wines. For an infinite number of miles in every direction, the universe cataclysm was gathering to a stupefying climax. Glancing at his watch, Max returned to the stage with a flourish. And now, ladies and gentlemen, he beamed, is everyone having one last wonderful time? Yes, called out the sort of people who call out yes when comedians ask them if they're having a wonderful time. It's me. That's wonderful, enthused Max. Absolutely wonderful. And as the Photon storms gather in swirling clouds about us, preparing to tear apart the last of the red-hot suns, I know you're all going to settle back and enjoy with me what I know we will all find immensely exciting and a terminal experience. He paused. He caught the audience with a glittering eye. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, he said, there's nothing penultimate about this one. He paused again. Tonight his timing was immaculate. Time after time he had done this show, night after night. Not the word night had any meaning here at the extremity of time. All there was the endless repetition of the final moment as the restaurant rocked slowly forward over the brink of time's furthest edge and back again. This night was good though. The audience was writhing in the palm of his sickly hand. His voice dropped. They had to strain to hear him. This, he said, really is the absolute end. The final, chilling desolation in which the whole majestic sweep of creation becomes extinct. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the proverbial it. He dropped his voice still lower. In the stillness, a fly would not have dared clear its throat. After this, he said, there is nothing. Void, emptiness, oblivion. Absolutely nothing. His eyes glittered again. Or did they twinkle? Nothing. Except, of course, for the sweet trolley and a fine selection of Aldebaran liqueurs. The band gave him a musical sting. He wished they wouldn't. He didn't need it, not an artist of his caliber. He could play the audience like his own musical instrument. They were laughing with relief. He followed on. And for once, he cried cheerily, you don't need to worry about having a hangover in the morning, because there won't be any more mornings. Oh, right. It's that much quieter. I don't know how to make it any louder, sadly. Although I did just lower my voice quite a bit, so... I mean, I can always turn it up more, if that helps. I was just trying to be relatively quiet, because I think I'm still peaking the mic. But I'm also sitting a little further back, because otherwise if I get closer and closer and closer, I'm just going to end up deep-throating the mic. But yeah, I mean, we can leave it at this volume if you want. And I usually keep the music turned down anyway, but... He beamed at his happy, laughing audience. He glanced up at the sky, going through the same dead routine every night. But his glance was only for a fraction of a second. He trusted it to do its job, as one professional trusts another. And now, he said, strutting about the stage, at the risk of putting a damper on this wonderful sense of doom and futility here this evening, I would like to welcome a few parties. He pulled a card from his pockets. Do we have? He put up a hand to hold back the cheers. Do we have a party here from the Zansequastel Flammarian Bridge Club from beyond the Vort Void of Quivarn? Are they here? Sorry, yeah, I'm trying. There are some voices I have to be a bit quieter to do because I don't have the I don't have the register for it, so I often go quiet and like lower my voice. I'll try to lean closer to the mic though if it helps, but I just don't want to make any gross mouth noises, you know. A rousing cheer came from the back, but he pretended not to hear. He peered around trying to find them. Are they here? He asked again to elicit a louder cheer. He got it, as he always did. Ah, there they are. Well, last bids, lads, and no cheating. Remember, this is a very solemn moment. Well, good. You don't want to end up in hospital, do you, Sniper? And yeah, don't make jokes. Don't take that out of context. Ever. The deep-throating thing, I mean. And do we have a party of minor deities from the halls of Asgard? Away to his right came a rumble of thunder. Lightning arced across the stage. A small group of hairy men with helmets sat looking very pleased with themselves and raised their glasses to him. Good. Stay away from hospitals. Or at least, you know, do things so that you don't end up in them. But go to hospitals if you need to. But do whatever you can to keep yourself healthy otherwise. Has-beens, he thought to himself. Careful with that hammer, sir, he said. They did the trick with the lightning again. Max gave him a very thin-lipped smile. And thirdly, he said, a party of young conservatives from Sirius B. Are they here? A party of smartly dressed young dogs stopped throwing rolls at each other and started throwing rolls at the stage. They yapped and barked unintelligibly. Yes, said Max. Well, this is your fault. You realize that? And finally, Max said, quieting the audience down and putting on his solemn face. Finally, I believe we have with us here tonight a party of believers, very devout believers, from the Church of the Second Coming of the Great Prophet Zarquan. There were about 20 of them, sitting right out on the edge of the floor, ascetically dressed, sipping mineral water nervously and staying apart from the festivities. They blinked resentfully as the spotlight was turned on them. There they are, said Max, sitting there patiently. He said he'd come again and he's kept you waiting a long time. So let's hope he's hurrying, fellas, because he's only got 8 minutes left. I'm glad you're having fun. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Carto. I'm trying my best. So, thank you. The party of Zarquan's followers sat rigid, refusing to be buffeted by the waves of uncharitable laughter which swept over them. Max restrained his audience. No, but seriously though, folks. Seriously though. No offense meant. No, I know we shouldn't make fun of deeply held beliefs. So I think a big hand, please, for the great prophet Zarquan. The audience clapped respectfully. Wherever he's got to. He blew a kiss to the stony-faced party and returned to the centre of the stage. I'm glad. I was worried that just reading Hitchhiker's Guide in general, because of how self-referential it is, like Zarquan himself is mentioned like way back at the start, so you have to like keep everything in mind as you're reading it to be able to self-reference it again. So I was worried that if I kept on reading, then sooner or later people would just be unable to get into it because, you know, you wouldn't know who any of the people were and Yeah, but I think the characters are entertaining, and I like how rambly the actual writing is. So, like, one of my favourite quotes is still, the whale soared through the air in the same way that bricks don't. Which is still one of my favourite lines. Or a sperm whale fell out of the sky and thought all its way down about the sudden existence that it had generated. It didn't know what it was before. It didn't know what it was going to be. It just knew that it now was. And it had to figure everything out before it fell 50 million feet to the floor, splattering on the floor. A bowl of petunias also spontaneously appeared and fell through the air. The only thing it thought was, oh no, not again. And science says that if we knew why it thought that, then we might have a much better understanding of the universe in general. I know it's a bit of a silly quote, but it's still one of my favourites. Anyway, he grabbed a tall stool and sat on it. "It's marvellous, though," he rattled on, "to see so many of you tonight. No, isn't it, though? Yes, absolutely marvellous. Because I know that so many of you come here time and time again, which I think is really wonderful, to come and watch this final end of everything, and then return home to your own eras, and raise families, strive for new and better societies, fight terrible wars for what you know to be right. It really gives one hope for the future of all life kind. Except, of course," he waved at the blitzing turmoil above and all around them, "that we know it hasn't got one." Arthur turned to Ford. He hadn't quite got this place worked out in his mind. "Look, surely," he said, "if the universe is about to end, don't we go with it?" Ford gave him a 3 pangalactic gargle blaster look. In other words, a rather unsteady one. "No," he said. "Look," he said. "As soon as you come into this dive, you get held in this sort of amazing force-shielded temporal warp thing, I think." "Oh," said Arthur. He turned his attention back to the bowl of soup he'd managed to get from the waiter to replace his steak. "Look," said Ford, "I'll show you." He grabbed a napkin off the table and fumbled hopelessly with it. "Look," he said, "imagine this napkin, right, as the temporal universe, right? And this spoon is a transductional mode in the matter curve." It took him a while to say this last part, and Arthur hated to interrupt him. "Well, thanks for joining us, Kato, and take care, whatever you're doing, but thank you for being here. And feel free to follow if you want to watch again next time. I read every Thursday, and do a lot of reading games in general. But take care until then, and bye for now. Have a good day." "That's the spoon I was eating with," he said. "All right," said Ford. Imagine this spoon." He found a small wooden spoon on a tray of relishes. "This spoon," but found it rather tricky to pick up. "See ya, you too. Take care." No, better still, this fork." "Hey, would you let go of my fork?" snapped Zaphod. "All right," said Ford. All right. Why don't we say this wine glass is the temporal universe?" "What, the one you've just knocked on the floor?" "Yeah, this was actually done by Evie, who I think might or might not still be here. I think she left. Yeah, the person who popped in earlier, she's who said about the Discord thing. She was the one who drew me and drew my jacket and stuff like that. I mean, the actual jacket is. Let me pull this up. Yeah. Yeah. Just my card jacket. Because I'm Jack, the playing card themed panda. Hence the eyes as well. Yeah, I just wanted everything to be themed appropriately. It's okay, there's nothing there. Yeah. I mean, the jacket was originally... I made Jack as an Undertale thing. But that was ages ago. And then I kind of wanted to repurpose him, but I still liked the jacket. So... And, but the jacket, the heart on it was actually a mistake, because Evie did my redesign for Jack, and she ended up doing a lot of this stuff by accident. And the heart, I figured, was a nice reference to Undertale, and because it looked like Sans' jacket anyway, I thought I'd just leave it all, because it just adds to the... Because I've got the spade on my left eye, I think. I think... Oh, maybe I don't accept links on here. Maybe Nightbot hasn't been registered for links yet. You can DM it to me. Just send me a message. So yeah. And yeah, so I've got the diamond on my chest, the heart on my jacket, the spade on my eye, and the club on my jacket hem, I guess. And the 10 as well. Because, you know, with my name, J-A-Q-K, Jack, Ace, Queen, King, it makes for a royal flush, more or less. Or just a straight, I guess, but still. Yeah. Yeah. It took him a while to say this last part, and Arthur hated to interrupt him. "That's the spoon I was eating with," he said. "All right," said Ford. "Imagine this spoon." He found a small wooden spoon on a tray of relishes. "This spoon," but found it rather tricky to pick up. "No, better still, this fork." "Hey, would you let go of my fork?" snapped Zaphod. "All right," said Ford. "All right, all right. Why don't we say that this wine glass is the temporal universe?" "What, the one you just knocked on the floor?" "Did I do that?" "Yes." "All right," said Ford. "Forget that. I mean, look, do you know how the universe actually began for a kick-off?" "Probably not," said Arthur, who wished he'd never embarked on any of this. "All right," said Ford. "Imagine this, right? You get this bath, right? A large round bath, and it's made of ebony." "Where from?" said Arthur. "Harrods was destroyed by the Vogons." "Doesn't matter." "So you keep saying." "Listen." "All right. You get this bath, see? Imagine you've got this bath, and it's ebony, conical." "Conical?" said Arthur. "What sort of..." "Shh," said Ford. "It's conical. So what you do is, you see, fill it with fine white sand, alright? Or sugar. Fine white sand and or sugar. Anything. It doesn't matter. Sugar's fine. And when it's full, you pull the plug out. Are you listening?" "I'm listening." "You pull the plug out, and it all just twirls away. Twirls away, you see, out of the plug hole." "I see." You don't see at all. I haven't even got to the clever bit yet. Do you want to hear the clever bit?" "Tell me the clever bit." "I'll tell you the clever bit." Ford thought for a moment, trying to remember what the clever bit was. "The clever bit," he said, "is this. You film it happening." "Clever." "That's not the clever bit. This is the clever bit. I remember now. This is the clever bit. The clever bit is that you then thread the film in the projector backwards." "Backwards?" "Yes, threading it backwards definitely is the clever bit. Then you just sit and watch it. Everything just appears to spiral upwards out of the plug hole and fill the bath. See?" "And that's how the universe began, is it?" said Arthur. "No," said Ford, "but it's a marvellous way to relax." He reached for his wine glass. "Where's my wine glass?" he said. "It's on the floor." "Ah." Tipping his chair back to look for it, Ford collided with a small green waiter who was approaching the table carrying a portable telephone. Ford excused himself to the waiter, explaining that it was because he was extremely drunk. 4% what? Life? Health? HP? The waiter said that was quite all right, and that he perfectly understood. Ford thanked the waiter for this kind indulgence, attempted to tug his forelock, missed by 6 inches, and slid under the table. "Mr. Zaphod Beeblebrox?" inquired the waiter. Yeah," said Zaphod, glancing up from his third steak. "There is a phone call for you." "Hey, what?" "A phone call, sir." "For me? Here? Hey, but who knows where I am?" One of his minds raced. The other dawdled lovingly over the food it was still shoveling in. Excuse me if I carry on, won't you?" said this eating head, and carried on. There were now so many people after him he'd lost count. He shouldn't have made such a conspicuous entrance. Hell, why not, though, he thought. "How do you know you're in a God, I can't speak." How do you know you're having fun if there's no one watching you have it? Maybe someone in here tipped off the intergalactic police, said Trillian. Everyone saw you come in. You mean they want to arrest me over the phone? said Zaphod. Could be. I'm a pretty dangerous dude when I'm concerned. Yeah, said a voice from under the table. You go to pieces so fast, people get hit by the shrapnel. Hey, what is this, Judgment Day? Snapped Zaphod. Do we get to see that as well? Asked Arthur, nervously. I'm in no hurry, muttered Zaphod. Okay, so who's the cat on the phone? He kicked forward. Hey, get up here, kid, he said to him. I may need you. I am not, said the waiter, personally acquainted with the metal gentleman in question, sir. Metal? Yes, sir. Did you say metal? Yes, sir. I said that I'm not personally acquainted with the metal gentleman in question. Okay, carry on. But I am informed that he has been waiting for your return for a considerable number of millennia. It seems you left here somewhat precipitately. Left here? Said Zaphod. Are you being strange? We've only just arrived here. Indeed, sir, persisted the waiter doggedly. But before you arrived here, sir, I understand that you left here. Zaphod tried this in one brain, then the other. You're saying, he said, that before we arrived here, we left here? This is going to be a long night, thought the waiter. Precisely, sir, he said. Put your analyst on danger money, baby, advised Zaphod. No, wait a minute, said Ford, emerging above table level again. Where exactly is here? To be absolutely exact, sir, it is Frogstar World B. But we just left there, protested Zaphod. We left there and came to the restaurant at the end of the universe. Yes, sir, feeling that he was now into the home stretch and running well. The one was constructed on the ruins of the other. Oh, said Arthur brightly. You mean we've travelled in time, but not in space? Listen, you semi-evolved simian, cut in Zaphod. Go climb a tree, will you? Arthur bristled. Go bang your heads together, Four Eyes, he advised Zaphod. No, the waiter said to Zaphod. Your monkey has got it right, sir. Arthur stuttered in fury and said nothing apposite, or indeed coherent. You jumped forward, I believe, 576,000 million years while staying in exactly the same place, explained the waiter. He smiled. He had a wonderful feeling that he'd finally won through against what had seemed to be insuperable odds. I don't know what mochis are, no. I mean, isn't mochi a food? A Japanese food? Like a rice, something made out of rice? Turned into like a weird chewy thing? But, you know, good. And I'm glad it's the last day you have to take your medicine. It's also good. Finishing a round of medicine's, you know, always beneficial for the health and the mind. That's it, said Zaphod. I got it. I told the computer to send us to the nearest place to eat. That's exactly what it did. Give or take 576,000 million years. We've never moved. Neat. They all agreed this was very neat. But who, said Zaphod, is the cat on the phone? Whatever happened to Marvin? Oh, that's fine. I'll go and check it out after this. Actually, let's see if I'm on. I'll go and have a look quickly. No reason not to at the moment. Whisper is good enough. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. It is very similar. Though mine doesn't zip. Mine doesn't. Mine zips up in the middle. Because I like zip-up hoodies. I've actually got another friend who streams, Zvarhart, who also wears a hoodie with a heart on it. So it's just a big thing, apparently. It's a very, I don't know. It's a good fashion statement, I guess. It's something I like, anyway. I don't add random people on Discord, I'm afraid. I don't I just don't really like giving out my Discord to people. It's more of a nervous social thing than anything. But, yeah. Sorry. I appreciate the offer, though. But who? Yeah. Whatever happened to Marvin? Said Trillian. Zaphod clapped his hands to his heads. The paranoid android. I left him moping about on Frogstar B. When was this? Well, 576,000 million years ago, I suppose, said Zaphod. Hey, hand me the wrap rod, plate captain. The little waiter's eyebrows wandered about his forehead in confusion. I beg your pardon, sir, he said. The phone, waiter, said Zaphod, grabbing it off him. You guys are so unhip, it's a wonder your bums don't fall off. Indeed, sir. Yeah, pretty much that. Hey, Marvin, is that you? Said Zaphod into the phone. How you doing, kid? There was a long pause before a thin, low voice came up the line. I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed, it said. Zaphod cupped his hands over the phone. It's Marvin, he said. Hey, Marvin, he said into the phone again. We're having a great time. Food, wine, a little personal abuse, and the King universe from going boom. Where can we find you? Again, the pause. You don't have to pretend to be interested in me, you know, said Marvin at last. I know perfectly well I'm only a menial robot. Okay, said Zaphod, but where are you? Reverse primary thrust, Marvin. That's what they say to me. Open airlock number 3, Marvin. Marvin, can you pick up that piece of paper? Can I pick up that piece of paper? Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and they ask me to... Yeah, sympathised Zaphod. Hardly at all. But I'm quite used to being humiliated, droned Marvin. I can even go and stick my head in a bucket of water if you like. Would you like me to go and stick my head in a bucket of water? I've got one ready. Wait a minute. Hey, Marvin, interrupted Zaphod, but it was too late. Sad little clunks and gurgles came up the line. What's he saying? Asked Trillian. Nothing, said Zaphod. He's just phoned up to wash his head at us. There, said Marvin, coming back on the line and bubbling a bit. I hope that gave satisfaction. Yeah, said Zaphod. Now will you please tell us where you are? I'm in the car park, said Marvin. The car park? Said Zaphod. What are you doing there? Parking cars. What else does one do in a car park? Okay, hang in there. We'll be right down. In one movement, Zaphod leapt to his feet, threw down the phone and wrote Hot Black Diciato on the bill. Come on, guys, he said. Marvin's in the car park. Let's get on down. What's he doing in the car park? Asked Arthur. Parking cars. What else, dum-dum? But what about the end of the universe? We'll miss the big moment. I've seen it. It's rubbish, said Zaphod. Nothing but a nabdgib. A what? Opposite of a big bang. Come on, let's get zappy. Okay. I didn't get that at first. I was confused by that as everyone else, I think. Few of the other diners paid them any attention as they weaved their way through the restaurant to the exit. Their eyes were riveted on the horror of the skies. An interesting effect to watch for, Max was telling them, is in the upper left-hand quadrant of the sky, where if you look very carefully, you can see the star system Hastromi boiling away into the ultraviolet. Anyone here from Hastromo? There were one or two slightly hesitant cheers from somewhere at the back. Well, said Max, beaming cheerfully at them, it's too late to worry about whether you left the gas on now. Chapter 18. The main reception foyer was almost empty, but Ford nevertheless weaved his way through it. Zaphod grasped him firmly by the arm and manoeuvred him into a cubicle standing to one side of the entrance hall. What are you doing to him? Asked Arthur. Sobering him up, said Zaphod and pushed a coin into the slot. Lights flashed, gases swirled. Hi, said Ford, stepping out a moment later. Where are we going? down the car park, come on. What about the personal time teleports, said Ford. Get us straight back to the Heart of Gold. Yeah, but I've cooled on the ship. As only we can have it. I don't want to play his games. Let's see what we can find. A Sirius Cybernetics Corporation Happy Vertical People Transporter took them down deep into the substrata beneath the restaurant. They were glad to see that it had been vandalised and didn't try to make them happy as well as take them down. Because those elevators are like all the other machines and robots in the Hitchhiker's Guide universe. They all have personalities and they all try very hard to make people happy, much to the detriment of the people they're trying to make happy. At the bottom of the shaft, the lift doors opened and a blast of cold, stale air hit them. The first thing they saw on leaving the lift was a long concrete wall with over 50 doors in it, offering lavatory facilities for all of 50 major life forms. Nevertheless, like every car park in the galaxy throughout the entire history of car parks, this car park smelt predominantly of impatience. They turned a corner and found themselves on a moving catwalk that traversed a vast cavernous space that stretched off into the dim distance. It was divided off into bays of each of which contained a spaceship belonging to one of the diners upstairs. Some smallish and utilitarian mass production models, others vast shining limo ships, the playthings of the very rich. Zaphod's eyes sparkled with something that may or may not have been avarice as he passed over them. In fact, it's best to be clear on the point. Avarice is definitely what was there. There he is, said Trillian. Marvin, down there. They looked where she was pointing. Dimly, they could see a small metal figure listlessly scrubbing a small rag on one remote corner of a giant Silver Cruise sun cruiser. At short intervals along the moving catwalk, wide, transparent tubes led down to floor level. Zaphod stepped off the catwalk into one, floated gently downwards. The others followed. Thinking back on this later, Arthur Dent thought it was the single most enjoyable experience of his travels in the galaxy. It does sound quite nice. Hey, Marvin, said Zaphod, striding over to him. Hey, kid. Are we pleased to see you? Marvin turned, and insofar as it was possible for a totally inert metal face to look reproachfully, this is what it did. No, you're not, he said. No one ever is. Suit yourself, said Zaphod, and turned away to ogle the ships. Ford went with him. Only Trillian and Arthur actually went up to Marvin. No, really, we are, said Trillian and patted him, in a way that he disliked intensely. Hanging around waiting for us all this time. 576,000,003,579 years, said Marvin. I counted them. Well, here we are now, said Trillian, feeling, quite correctly in Marvin's view, that it was a slightly foolish thing to say. The first 10 million years were the worst, said Marvin, and the second 10 million years, they were the worst too. The third million years I didn't enjoy at all. After that I went into a bit of a decline. He paused, just long enough to make them feel they ought to say something, and then interrupted. It's the people you meet in this job that really get you down, he said, and paused again. Trillian cleared her throat. Is that... The best conversation I had was over 40 million years ago, continued Marvin. Again the pause. Oh, and that was with a coffee machine. He waited. That's you don't like talking to me, do you? Said Marvin in a low, desolate tone. Trillian talked to Arthur instead. Further down the chamber, Ford Prefect had found something of which he liked very much the look. Several such things, in fact. Zaphod, he said in a quiet voice. Just look at some of these little star trolleys. Zaphod looked and liked. The craft they were looking at was in fact pretty small, but extraordinary, and very much a rich kid's toy. It was not much to look at. It resembled nothing so much as a paper dart, about 20 feet long, made out of thin but tough metal foil. At the rear end was a small horizontal two-man cockpit. It had a tiny charm drive engine, which was not capable of moving at any great speed. The thing it did have, however, was a heat sink. The heat sink had a mass of some 2,000 billion tons, and was contained within a black hole mounted in an electromagnetic field situated halfway along the length of the ship, and this heat sink enabled the craft to be manoeuvred to within a few miles of a yellow sun, there to catch and ride the solar flares that burst out from its surface. Flare riding is one of the most exotic and exhilarating sports in existence, and those who can dare and afford it, are amongst the most lionized men in the galaxy. It is also, of course, stupefyingly dangerous. Those who don't die riding invariably die of sexual exhaustion at one of the Daedalus Club's après-flare parties. Ford and Zaphod looked and passed on. "And this baby," said Ford, "the Tangerine Star Buggy with the black sunbusters." Again, the Star Buggy was a metal ship, a small ship, a totally misnamed one in fact, because the one thing it couldn't manage was interstellar distances. Basically, it was a sporty planet hopper dolled up to something it wasn't. Nice lines though. They passed on. The next one was a big one and 30 yards long, a coach-built limo ship, and obviously designed with one aim in mind, that of making the beholder sick with envy. The paintwork and accessory detail clearly said, "I am not only rich enough to afford this ship, I am also rich enough to not take it seriously." It was quite wonderfully hideous. "Just look at it," said Zaphod. "Multi-cluster quark drive, Perspulex running boards, gotta be a Laslar Lyricon custom job." He examined every inch. "Yeah," he said, "look, the infra-pink lizard emblem on the neutrino cowling. Laslar's trademark. The man has no shame." "I passed by one of these mothers once, out in the Axel Nebula," said Ford. "I was going flat out and the thing just strolled past me, star drive hardly ticking over. Just incredible." Zaphod whistled appreciatively. 10 seconds later," said Ford, "it smashed straight into the third moon of Jagellan Beta." "Yeah, right. Amazing looking ship though. Looks like a fish, moves like a fish, steers like a cow." Ford looked round to see the other side. "Hey, come and see," he called out. "There's a big mural painted on this side. A bursting sun, disaster area's trademark. This must be Hot Black's ship. Lucky old bugger. They do this terrible song, you know, which ends with a stunt ship crashing into the sun. Meant to be an amazing spectacle. Expensive in stunt ships, though." Zaphod's attention, however, was elsewhere. His attention was riveted on the ship standing next to Hot Black Desiato's limo. His mouth hung open. "That," he said, "is really bad for the eyes." Ford looked. He too stood astonished. It was a ship of a classic, simple design, like a flattened salmon, 20 yards long, very clean, very sleek. There was just one remarkable thing about it. "It's so black," said Ford Prefect. "You can hardly make out its shape. Light just seems to fall into it." Zaphod said nothing. He had simply fallen in love. The blackness of it was so extreme that it was almost impossible to tell how close you were standing to it. "Your eyes just slide off of it," said Ford in wonder. It was an emotional moment. He bit his lip. Zaphod moved forward to it, slowly, like a man possessed, or more accurately, like a man who wanted to possess. His hand reached out to stroke it. His hand stopped. His hand reached out to stroke it again. His hand stopped again. "Come and feel the surface," he said in a hushed voice. Ford put his hand out to feel it. His hand stopped. You can't," he said. "See?" said Zaphod. "It's just totally frictionless. Must be one mother of a mover." He turned to look at Ford seriously, or at least one of his heads did. The other stayed gazing at the orange ship. Gazing in awe at the ship. "What do you reckon, Ford?" he said. "You mean, Ford looked over his shoulder. "You mean stroll off with it? You think we should?" "No. Nor do I. But we're going to, aren't we? How can we not?" They gazed a little longer, till Zaphod suddenly pulled himself together. "We better shift soon," he said. "In a moment or so the universe will have ended, and all the Captain Creeps will be pouring down here to find their bougemobiles." "Zaphod," said Ford. "Yeah?" "How do we do it?" "Simple," said Zaphod. He turned. "Marvin!" he called. Slowly, laboriously, and with a million little clanking and creaking noises that he had learned to simulate. Marvin turned around to answer the summons. "Come on over here," said Zaphod. "We've got a job for you." Marvin trudged towards them. "I won't enjoy it," he said. "Yes, you will," enthused Zaphod. "There's a whole new life stretching out ahead of you." "Oh, not another one," groaned Marvin. "Will you just shut up and listen?" hissed Zaphod. "This time there's going to be some excitement and adventure and really wild things." "Sounds awful," Marvin said. "Marvin, all I'm trying to ask you..." "I suppose you want me to open the spaceship for you." "What? Yes, that's right," said Zaphod jumpily. He was keeping at least 3 eyes on the entrance. Time was short. "Well, I wish you'd just tell me rather than try to engage my enthusiasm," said Marvin, "because I haven't got one." He walked up to the ship, touched it, and a hatchway swung open. Ford and Zaphod stared at the opening. "Don't mention it," said Marvin. "Oh, you didn't." He trudged away again. Arthur and Trillian clustered around. "What's happening?" asked Arthur. "Look at this," said Ford. "Look at the interior of this ship." "Weirder and weirder," breathed Zaphod. "It's black," said Ford. "Everything is just totally black." In the restaurant, things were fast approaching the moment after which there shouldn't be any more moments. All eyes were fixed on the dome, other than those of Hot Black Desiato's bodyguard, which were looking intently at Hot Black Desiato, and those of Hot Black Desiato himself, which the bodyguard had closed out of respect. The bodyguard leaned over the table. Had Hot Black Desiato been alive, he probably would have deemed this a good moment to lean back, or even go for a short walk. His bodyguard was not a man which improved with proximity. On account of his unfortunate condition, however, Hot Black Desiato remained totally inert. "Mr. Desiato, sir?" whispered the bodyguard. Whenever he spoke, he looked as though the muscles on either side of his mouth were clambering over each other to get out of the way. That's how my mouth feels at the best of times. "Mr. Desiato, can you hear me?" Hot Black Desiato, quite naturally, said nothing. "Hot Black," hissed the bodyguard. Again, quite naturally, Hot Black Desiato did not reply. Supernaturally, however, he did. On the table in front of him, a wine glass rattled and a fork rose an inch or so and tapped against the glass. It settled on the table again. The bodyguard gave a satisfied grunt. "It's time we get going, Mr. Desiato," muttered the bodyguard. "We don't want to get caught in the rush. Not in your condition. You want to get to the next gig nice and relaxed." There was a really big audience for it. One of the best. Oh, there was a really big audience for it. One of the best. Kakrafoon. 576,002 million years ago. Had you been looking forward to it? The fork rose again, waggled in a non-committal sort of way and dropped again. "Ah, come on," said the bodyguard. "It's going to have been great. You knocked him cold." The bodyguard would have given Dr. Dan Street Mentioner an apoplectic attack. "The black ship going into the sun always gets them, and the new one's a beauty. Be real sorry to see it go. If we get on down there..." "Hello, Sandy Pig. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see ya. How you doing? Hope you're okay." "If we go down there, I'll set the black ship autopilot, and we'll cruise off in the limo, okay?" The fork tapped once in agreement, and the glass of wine mysteriously emptied itself. The bodyguard wheeled Hot Black Desiato's chair out of the restaurant. "And now," cried Max from the centre of the stage, "the moment you've all been waiting for." He flung his arms into the air. Behind him, the band went into a frenzy of percussion and rolling synth chords. Max had argued with them about this, but they had claimed it was in their contract that that's what they would do. His agent would have had to sort it out. "The skies begin to boil," he said. "Nature collapses into the screaming void. In 20 seconds' time, the universe itself will be at an end. See where the light of infinity bursts in upon us." The hideous fury of destruction blazed about them, and at that moment a small trumpet sounded as if from an infinite distance. Max's eyes swiveled around to glare at the band, None of them seemed to be playing a trumpet. Suddenly, a wisp of smoke was swirling and shimmering on the stage next to him. The trumpet was joined by more trumpets. Over 500 times Max had done this show, and nothing like this had ever happened before. He drew back in alarm from the swirling smoke, and as he did so, a figure slowly materialized inside. The figure of an ancient man, bearded, robed, and wreathed in light. In his eyes were stars, and on his brow a golden crown. "What's this?" whispered Max, wild-eyed. "What's happening?" At the back of the restaurant, the stony-faced party from the church of the second coming of the great prophet Zarquon leapt ecstatically to their feet, chanting and crying. Max blinked in amazement. He threw up his arms to the audience. "A big hand, please, ladies and gentlemen," he hollered. "For the great prophet Zarquon! He has come! Zarquon has come again!" Thunderous applause broke out as Max strode across the stage and handed them his microphone to the prophet. Zarquon coughed. He peered around the assembled gathering. The stars in his eyes blinked uneasily. He handled the microphone with confusion. He said. "Hello. Look, I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I've had the most ghastly time, all things cropping up at the last moment." He seemed nervous of the expectant, awed hush. He cleared his throat. "How are we for time?" he said. Have I just got a minute?" And so the universe ended. Chapter 19. One of the major selling points of the wholly remarkable travel book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, apart from its relative cheapness and the fact that it has the words "Don't Panic" written in large friendly letters on its cover, is its compendious and occasionally accurate glossary. The statistics relating to the geosocial nature of the universe, for instance, are deftly set out between pages 938,024 and 938,026. And the simplistic style in which they are written is partly explained by the fact that the editors, having to meet a publishing deadline, copied the information off the back of a packet of cereal, breakfast cereal, hastily embroidering it with a few footnotes in order to avoid prosecution laws under the incomprehensible, torturous galactic copyright laws. It is interesting to note that a later and wilier editor sent the book backwards in time through a temporal warp and then successfully sued the breakfast cereal company for infringement of the same laws. Here is an example. The universe. Some information to help you live in it. 1. Area infinite. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy offers this definition of the word infinite. Infinite. Bigger than the biggest thing ever and then some. Much bigger, in fact, that is, in fact, really amazingly immense. A totally stunning size. Wow, that's big time. Infinity is just so big that by comparison, bigness itself looks really titchy. Galactic multiplied, gigantic multiplied by colossal multiplied by staggeringly huge is the sort of concept we're trying to get across here. 2. Imports. None. It is impossible to import things into an infinite area, there being no outside to import things from. 3. Exports. See imports. 4. Population. None. It is known that there is an infinite number of worlds simply because there is an infinite amount of space for them to be in. However, not every single one of them is inhabited. Therefore, there must be a finite number of inhabited worlds. Any finite number divided by infinity is as near to nothing as makes no odds, so the average population of all planets in the universe can be said to be 0. From this, it follows that the population of the whole universe is also 0, and that any people you may meet from time to time are merely the products of a deranged imagination. Monetary units. Number 5. None. In fact, there are 3 freely convertible currencies in the galaxy, but none of them count. The Altarian dollar has recently collapsed. The Flaninian pobble bead is the only The Altarian dollar has recently collapsed. The Flaninian pobble bead is only exchangeable for other Flaninian pobble beads, and the Triganic Pew has its own very special problems. Its exchange rate of 8 ningis to 1 pu is simple enough, but since a ningi is a triangular rubber coin 6,800 miles across each side, no one's ever collected enough to own 1 pu. Ningis are not negotiable currency because Galactibanks refuse to deal in fiddling small change. From this basic premise, it is very simple to prove that Galactibanks are also the product of a deranged imagination. Art none. The function of art is to hold a mirror up to nature, and there simply isn't a mirror big enough. See point 1. Sex none. Well, in fact, there is an awful lot of this, largely because of the total lack of money, trade, banks, art, or anything else that might keep all the non-existent people of the universe occupied. However, it is not worth embarking on a long discussion of it now, because it really is terribly complicated. For further information, see Guide chapters 7, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16, 17, 19, 21 to 84 inclusive, and in fact, most of the rest of the guide. Chapter 20. The restaurant continued existing, but everything else had stopped. Temporal relastatics held it and protected it in a nothingness that wasn't merely a vacuum. It was simply nothing. There was nothing in which a vacuum could said to exist. The force-shielded dome had once again been rendered opaque. The party was over, the diners were leaving. Zarquan had vanished along with the rest of the universe. Time turbines were preparing to pull the restaurant back across the brink of time, in readiness for the lunch sitting. And Max Quardlepleen was back in his small curtained dressing room, trying to raise his agent on the tempophone. In the car park stood the black ship, closed and silent. Into the car park came the late Mr. Top Black Desiato, propelled along the catwalk by his bodyguard. They descended one of the tubes. As they approached the limo ship, a hatchway swung down from its side, engaged the wheels of the wheelchair, and drew it inside. The bodyguard followed, and having seen his boss safely connected up to his death support system, moved up to the small cockpit. Here he operated the remote control system, which activated the autopilot in the black ship lying next to the limo, thus causing great relief to Zaphod Beeblebrox, who had been trying to start the thing for over 10 minutes. The black ship glided smoothly forward out of its bay, turned and moved down the central causeway swiftly and quietly. At the end it accelerated rapidly, flung itself into the temporal launch chamber, and began the long journey back to the distant past. The Milliway's lunch menu quotes, by permission, a passage from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The passage is this. The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through 3 distinct and recognizable phases, those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch? No, I'm glad you like my accent. I can't really take it wrong. Yeah, I know some people like British accents, some of them don't. And depends on the British accent as well. But yeah, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I remember you saying. And I saw you say again up above, because I guessed what your nationality was the first day you came in. But, yeah. You probably do to a degree, although I know one German person who doesn't have an accent, or who doesn't have a German accent anyway. Allegedly, according to her. I've not heard it, but... The menu goes on to suggest that Milliway's, the restaurant at the end of the universe, would be a very agreeable and sophisticated answer to that third question. What it doesn't go on to say is that though it will usually take a large civilization many thousands of years to pass through the how, why, and where phases, small social groupings under stressful conditions can pass through them with extreme rapidity. How are we doing? Said Arthur Dent. Badly, said Ford Prefect. Where are we going? Said Trillian. I don't know, said Zaphod Beeblebrox. Why not? Demanded Arthur Dent. Shut up, suggested Zaphod Beeblebrox and Ford Prefect. Basically, what you're trying to say, said Arthur Dent, ignoring the suggestion, is that we're out of control. The ship was rocking and swaying sickeningly as Ford and Zaphod tried to wrest control from the autopilot. The engine howled and whined like tired children in a supermarket. It's the wild colour scheme that freaks me, said Zaphod, whose love affair with this ship has lasted almost 3 minutes into the flight. Every time you try to operate one of these weird black controls that are labelled in black on a black background, A little black light lights up black to let you know you've done it. What is this? Some kind of galactic hyperhearse? You seem okay. I mean, I can read your English so far, so... Yeah, well, I mean, if you spend enough time on the internet, I think most people can learn English. The walls of the swaying cabin were also black. The ceiling was black. The seats, which were rudimentary since the only important trip the ship was designed for was supposed to be unmanned, were black. The control panel was black. The instruments were black. The little screws that held them in place were black. The thin, tufted nylon floor covering was black. And when they lifted up a corner of it, they had discovered that the foam underlay was also black. Perhaps whoever designed it had eyes that responded to different wavelengths, offered Trillian. Or they didn't have much imagination, muttered Arthur. Perhaps, said Marvin. He was feeling very depressed. In fact, though they weren't to know it, the decor had been chosen in honour of the owner's sad, lamented, and tax-deductible condition. The ship gave a particularly sickening lurch. Take it easy, pleaded Arthur. You're making me space sick. Time sick, said Ford. We're plummeting backwards through time. Thank you, said Arthur. Now I think I really am going to be ill. Go ahead, said Zaphod. We could do with a little colour about this place. This is meant to be a polite after-dinner conversation, is it? Snapped Arthur. Zaphod left the controls for Ford to figure out, and lurched over to Arthur. Look, Earthman, he said angrily. You've got a job to do, right? The question to the ultimate answer, right? What, that thing? Said Arthur. I thought we'd forgotten about that. Not me, baby. Like the mice said, it's worth a lot of money in the right quarters. And it's all locked up in that head thing of yours. Yes, but nothing. Think about it. The meaning of life. We got our fingers on that. We can hold every shrink in the galaxy up to ransom. And that's worth a bundle. I owe mine a mint. Arthur took a deep breath without much enthusiasm. All right, he said. But where do we start? How should I know? They say that the ultimate answer or whatever is 42. How am I supposed to know what the question is? It could be anything. I mean, what's 6 times 7? Zaphod looked at him hard for a moment, then his eyes blazed with excitement. 42! He cried. Arthur wiped his palm across his forehead. Yes, he said patiently. I know that. I don't know what we have in my country anymore. I don't know what the grading system's like at the moment. Zaphod's faces fell. I'm just saying that the question could be anything at all, said Arthur, and I don't see how I'm meant to know. Because, hissed Zaphod, you were there when your planet did the big firework. We have a thing on Earth, began Arthur. Had, corrected Zaphod. Called tact. Oh, never mind. Look, I just don't know. A low voice echoed dully around the cabin. I know, said Marvin. Ford called out from the controls he was fighting a losing battle with. Stay out of this, Marvin, he said. This is organism talk. It's printed in the Earthman's brainwave patterns, continued Marvin. But I don't suppose you'd be very interested in knowing that. You mean, said Arthur, you mean you can see into my mind? Yes, said Marvin. Arthur stared in astonishment. And? He said. It amazes me how you can manage to live in anything that small. Ah, said Arthur. Abuse. Yes, confirmed Marvin. Ignore him, said Zaphod. He's only making it up. Making it up, said Marvin, swiveling his head in a parody of astonishment. Why would I want to make anything up? Life's bad enough as it is without wanting to invent any more of it. Marvin, said Trillian, in a gentle, kindly voice that only she was still capable of assuming in talking to this misbegotten creature. If you knew all along, then why didn't you tell us? Marvin's head swiveled back to her. You didn't ask, he simply said. Well, we're asking you now, Metal Man, said Ford, turning around to look at him. At that moment, the ship suddenly stopped rocking and swaying. The engine pitch settled down to a gentle hum. Hey, Ford, said Zaphod. That sounds good. Have you worked out the controls of this boat? No, said Ford. I just stopped fiddling with them. I reckon we just go to wherever this ship is going and get off it fast. Yeah, right, said Zaphod. I could tell you weren't really interested, murmured Marvin to himself and slumped in a corner and switched himself off. Trouble is, said Ford, that the one instrument in this wild ship that is giving me any reading is worrying me. If it is what I think it is, and if it's saying what I think it's saying, then we've already gone too far back into the past, maybe as much as 2 million years before our own time. Zaphod shrugged. Time is bunk, he said. I wonder who this ship belongs to anyway, said Arthur. Me, said Zaphod. No, who it really belongs to. Really me, insisted Zaphod. Look, property is theft, right? Therefore, theft is property. Therefore, this ship is mine, okay? Tell the ship that, said Arthur. Zaphod strode over to the console. Ship, he said, banging on the panels. This is your new owner. Speaking to... He got no further. Several things happened at once. The ship dropped out of time travel mode and re-emerged into real space. All the controls on the console, which had been shut down for the time trip, now lit up. A large vision screen above the console winked into life, revealing a wide starscape and a single very large sun dead ahead of them. None of these things, however, were responsible for the fact that Zaphod was at the same moment, hurled bodily backwards against the rear of the cabin, as were all others. They were hurled back by a single thunderous clap of noise that thudded out of the monitor's speakers surrounding the vision screen. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. But it's been a good read. Been enjoying it. I'm glad that so many people stopped by today to say hi and enjoy it themselves. I can't comment much on Minecraft or Lego. I used to love Lego as a kid, but I haven't played with it in ages. But I'm not really a Minecraft player either. So I don't play it all that much, but... But it's still fun, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here and say goodbye. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Those that stopped in, those that stayed, those that had to leave, and those that followed. And I hope that everyone has a good day. And I'm very thankful that you came by to listen. But I do want to leave with the outro that I was intending to do. And the next stream will be tomorrow. I'm going to finish 12 minutes at last. And also I'm going to start... I can't remember the name of the game. It'll be announced anyway. 8 PM my time, which I don't remember what it is in German time. 7 PM GMT. So yeah, whenever 7 PM GMT is for you converted. But I'm gonna do the outro thing that I had planned, and then go off. Just need to get it all set up. I'm going to turn down my music because I want to get this right. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So now 8 PM or 7 PM GMT. Anyway, so right. So let's get on with the outro. There we go. Right then. Good night, everyone, and thanks for stopping by. Goodbye for now. Goodbye.